What makes the world move? What makes it move forward instead of backward? Economic growth, international trade, the ability to feed itself. What moves the world to trade sustainably? What moves it to prosper now and tomorrow? What moves a business to serve the world? What moves it to serve all people when it believes it must? When it knows it can? When profit and planet are no longer a compromise? This is the dream of the modern supply chain. To eliminate waste, to share the world's resources, to create a better future for business, the planet, and everyone on it. This is how we empower our customers. We free them to serve their business and humanity.
Okay, you have the agenda. I won't go over the agenda. I'm just going to say just a couple quick words about IGEL's work in the circular economy area, maybe one overarching theme to think about from an academic perspective, and you'll be happy to hear that that will be the only academic perspective in this particular conference you get. I do want to make a pitch, though, for you to come back. If this is your first time at Wharton, to other conferences that we have. In particular, we have a conference which we call our annual IGEL conference is organized with an eye of what business is interested and academics are interested in as well. And that is going to be coming up in this April, and the topic is going to be business education and sustainability. IGEL is having its 10th anniversary this year. We're taking that occasion to have both business panels on that topic and academic panels. So if you're interested in that, it's April 26th, and hope you can come back. The last one we did on that vein was also on circular economy, and the subtitle was From Concept to Business Reality. So of course the circular economy has been an idea that's been around for a long time, ever since recycling in some sense, and a sort of conceptual idea. You can basically describe it, and this is the one academic idea I'm going to leave you with and then turn it over, is the big vision is, as the video just indicated, profit and planet, or in more academic language, that you decouple economic growth activities from consumption of the Earth's resources. So how do you do that? You do that by reuse, recycling, redesign, and a lot of the areas that we're going to be hearing about today. There's been a lot of work academically in the past, so there's something called closed loop supply chains that I think you'll be hearing about. There's a lot of work that's been done over the years on that topic, and recycling, of course, has been around for a long time. One dream that occurred to me this morning is that this idea, if it's catching on sufficiently, you could even imagine establishing a center for a circular economy at Wharton or somewhere else, with the general big idea that eventually you would achieve a transformation led by business to be solving a lot of the problems that we're facing environmentally in the world today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Gary Service, who's going to moderate today. He's a senior fellow at IGEL, and we're very happy to have had him as a moderator for a lot of our events. And he also teaches corporate sustainability here for the Master's of Environmental Studies program. And he is, in his day job, he's at Insight Venture Partners in New York City. Gary, thanks for agreeing to do this, and I'll turn it over to you. Have a great day.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everyone, for being here on this incredibly beautiful day in February. Didn't know that we were going to be saying that, but absolutely welcome to everyone. I just wanted to just say a few quick words about the circular economy and a few concepts to really set the day. Do you mind moving to the next slide over there? Oh, it's me. Clicker. Oh, thank you. I got it. Super. And so a few ideas for us to think about. One of the cool pieces of today's conference is we have the entire supply chain here with us. They are represented in a lot of the different points that are critical in identifying and bringing to market these concepts of the circular economy. And I think you're going to get a really unique perspective of that today because we have so many. I want to also highlight partnership, and I think you'll hear from Kim a little later, but one of the integral pieces of this beautiful concept of the circular economy is there is no way to execute on the circular economy as a silo, as a single operator. This is such the demonstration of the power of partnership and how all of the players in the supply chain work together to deliver the concept. I also want to point another key word today you'll hear often is innovation. And the reason why you're going to hear that word so much is because, as Eric mentioned, this is a concept and it's starting to become a reality, but it can't become a reality without a lot of innovation, a lot of folks thinking about their particular part of the supply chain and how to execute that in new ways and critically better ways as well. When I talk in my class, I basically say the purpose of business is value creation, okay? If it's not creating value, net creating value, that's a problem. Because you can say, I think business did this that was awful. But you should look at it in terms of how business is coming together and looking at value creation. Because there is value destruction that goes on in day to day. We talk about this concept of natural capital and valuing nature. Every business is at some level building and destroying value every day. I know that's not an easy concept, but net, what we look at in the circular economy is to make that a positive equation. Net, creating more value as we move through the systems. And today we're going to be focusing on supply chain, and you're going to see that at every point. The last thing that I want to say, and I think everyone should just recognize this about sustainability in general, it's about opportunity. Business thrives on opportunity. And what you see here today and what will be demonstrated is all of the opportunities that exist to create value. And again, when I speak to students about this, it's like I expect them to come up with all of the ideas and the new approaches to basically tap that value creation opportunity. And again, today, that's a key piece that we're going to see. So, not going to get academic, as Eric says today, but I do want to point out this McKinsey study here that really talks to this idea of where the impact can be. And these two charts up here really show you how critical in the process supply chain is. As you talk about sustainability in general, it's all about systems. And it's putting boundaries around systems so that you can analyze it and optimize it. And here, what you're looking for is where there's an opportunity for you to make a positive impact. And that's what this chart here is showing you, that if you look in supply chain, it's ripe. There's so much going on there. And it's these organizations that you're going to hear from today that are really pushing in that direction to unlock that value, because here it is. Here's where it is. Simple chart here, okay? People use the term circular economy. It is a bit overused, it's a bit misunderstood, and that is not bad. That is healthy, actually, because different organizations are approaching it differently. We typically look at the chart that's here on the left, and that's the status quo, the linear economy, the make, use, destroy. That is where we are moving from. And simply looking at the circular economy, and the key aspect here is that separation of the cycles, the technical cycle and the biological cycle. Those pieces there and how you get to that is, as I like to say, or as an old boss of mine used to say, it's definitely a says easy, does hard kind of thing. So while this is a beautiful concept, the difference is how organizations start taking action today to move toward this. The last thing I want to say is, and not to get political because that is not where I'm going, but in today's environment of where we are and what is happening in Washington, some people are afraid of what's going to happen to environmental initiatives and sustainability and how is it all going to work out. My comment is, and my opinion is, first, I'm an optimist. I just want to lay that out there. So I'm not the Debbie Downer kind of person on this stuff. What my approach is and my belief is that concepts like the circular economy are absolutely independent of what administration is in Washington or who in the world order is making decisions. The reason is, and this is the true power, the power lies within business to make choices every day. And the choices are made. Value creation, how am I going to do it? People don't do circular economy because it's a feel-good activity, all right? They do circular economy and work on the principles at all of these companies because they're actually coming up with better ways to do it. And so that is absolutely independent of any political activity because business is where the rubber hits the road. Business is where execution happens of a concept that is so broad in the areas it touches. And each of these areas you're going to see today, you'll see how they focused in on a particular aspect to unlock the value that circular economy does. All right. So, we're going to start with our first speaker this morning, and that's going to be David Clark, who is the Vice President of Safety, Environment, and Sustainability at Amcor, a packaging company, worldwide packaging company, as David was telling me, to a global. I think they're Australian-based. He's from Michigan. They have an office in the UK that you were mentioning, I believe, and so really a global approach, and supply chain is global. So let's be clear about that. So I'm going to let David come up here and kick us off for today.
All right. Thank you, Gary. Thank you to the people at IGEL and the people from CHEP for organizing this. I'm really glad to be here and looking forward to hearing the other speakers as well. For those of you who may not be familiar with Amcor, as Gary said, we are a global manufacturer of packaging for consumer goods products. So the main products that we make are flexible packaging, which looks like this. You can think of potato chip bags or maybe the bags your lettuce or bread comes in. Also the little covers that you punch through to get pills out of the blister packs. Number of those types of things. If you go to the hospital, that when they open the syringe, those sterile packages are probably made by Amcor. We do folding packages like this fancy gum that opens up. And we also do quite a few plastic bottles, rigid plastic packaging for customers like Pepsi, Campbell's, consumer goods products for home care, Clorox, personal care like Johnson & Johnson. So chances are good you've touched one of our products within the last few days, if not already, if you've touched that Gatorade bottle on your desk this morning. So we're at a conference talking about sustainability, and the first guy who's up here is talking to you about plastic bottles. So I'm gonna throw this back at you. When I talk about plastic bottles and plastic packaging, what are the thoughts that come into your mind? Just shout out a couple. Trash. I'm sorry. BPA. Petroleum. Yep. Waste in the oceans. Well, that pretty much covers it. Thank you very much.
Looks like you guys have PR.
Yeah, but I think it's important to get this out because now what I want to talk to you about is why we do what we do. And those are certainly issues that need to be addressed, and we're working on them. But what's really important here is, let's move forward, is to talk about what's the role of packaging. Because when most consumers deal with packaging, you deal with it for maybe a few minutes and you use the product and then you're left holding this thing that hopefully you can recycle. If you can't recycle, you're going to feel bad about it. But what we do is we make sure that the products get manufactured by our customers, make it through the entire supply chain, through distribution, through retail, and are in your refrigerator or wherever they go until you're ready to use them. And when you're ready to use them, they're safe and they're fresh, and they're going to be available. A few years ago, the United Nations published a report that said that 1/3 of all of the food that's produced in the world is wasted. In the developing world, it's lost between the field and the processing or production area. In the developed world where we are, a lot of the food is lost after that, either in restaurants or even in our homes. I mean, we've all had the classic soggy cucumber that we've had to throw away because we bought it being really aspirational about eating it, and then it didn't last long enough to make it to Saturday when we were making that salad. So what we do is we really focus on how do we protect the resources that went into creating that food, whether it's a dairy product like the example here, or sugar or fruit juice or wine that's going into the packages. And typically the resources that go into that product are much, much higher than the resources that go into the packaging that we make. We've been very efficient over the last 20 years at driving resource and materials out of packaging. They're super lightweight today, they're super efficient, they're super strong, which is one of the reasons it becomes difficult about their persistence in the environment and recycling and all of those things. But in general, if you look at the supply chain, the impacts of the food supply, retailing, even consumers driving home are fairly high compared to the impacts of the packaging themselves. And our job is to make sure that all of these resources and these resources are preserved using the small amount of materials that we provide for packaging. So that's where we start with our thinking about what we do. And as we design packaging, what we're trying to do is optimize it so that if we use too little packaging, we get the product waste I was talking about. If we over-design the packaging and you get too much, there's also waste associated with that. So what we're really trying to do is come up with the optimal designs to minimize the total environmental impact of the materials and resources that we use to make packaging, and to try to make the whole supply chain more efficient. And if we do that really well and we innovate over time using different types of materials, using different types of design, we can actually drive this line down lower by using lighter weight materials, maybe bio-based materials, recycled content, those types of things. So this is where we're trying to get to. We're also working on how do we get more material recycled, how do we keep it out of the oceans, all those things. But I'm here today talking mostly about supply chain. So that's where we're coming from. So some examples of how we've been doing that I think are really relevant here. One of the concepts to remember when we talk about circular economy is that's one tool in the sustainability toolbox. And the idea is not to get more materials flowing through circularity by making things heavier and possibly more expensive. The idea is to optimize the whole system. So the hierarchy of reduce, then reuse, then recycle still applies. And if we want to create these sort of regenerative systems that are virtuous and all of those things, we still have to look at how do we become more efficient at using fewer materials and fewer resources to achieve what we need to do. And one of the things that we've been, I think, really good at with our designs at Amcor is using less plastic in the first place to make the bottles and packages that we make. This is one example with a new Gatorade bottle that's been released in some parts of the world that uses roughly 30% less plastic than the bottle that you have sitting on your desk right now. It's still a new release that's out in some parts of the world, hasn't come out here. But if you look at a Gatorade bottle, it's a little bit different than a carbonated soft drink bottle. Of course, a carbonated bottle is pressurized, it's holding the bubbles in. Gatorade bottle is actually filled hot and then sealed so that the product inside stays sterile and it's safe to drink without being refrigerated. When you fill a hot liquid in a bottle and put the cap on, what happens? As it cools, it actually contracts and forms a vacuum. So the sides of that bottle are being pulled in. And the old way that we used to combat that was to make a really heavy bottle with some ridges and whatever to to support the vacuum and also make sure the bottle was strong enough to make it through the supply chain. These new bottles are actually designed to embrace that vacuum, and the sides pull in and actually become stiffer. The base pulls up to absorb some of the vacuum, and then the cap on this bottle, you'll see, is actually quite a bit smaller than the cap that's on your desk. So we've taken some plastic out of that too. So we've changed the design of the cap, the body, and the base. It's using the vacuum to actually make the bottle stronger. And this bottle has the same properties in terms of top load, transportation, shippability as the bottle that you have on your desk right now with 30% less plastic. So, one of the things that's really important is to be able to work with our customers, Pepsi or whoever, come up with designs that we can use those technologies that still work with their brands, and especially still work with their manufacturing and distribution systems. They have to work through the filling lines, fit in their pallets, make it through the rest of the distribution system. So that's one of the areas where, when you're looking at supply chain and optimization, that partnership really becomes important to be able to achieve those types of those goals. Another area probably a little bit more related to circular economy is incorporating recycled plastic back into the bottles again. And this is an example, again, a partnership with PepsiCo on Naked Juice. The bottles that we make for Naked Juice are made with 100% recycled PET. So it's collected from consumers, cleaned back to FDA food grade standards, put back into bottles again. This is actually a really complex process. When you see the diagrams of circular economy with those nice clean loops, that's not the real world right now. Bottles are collected by waste management systems who are usually, working with government contracts. The materials are sold through international commodity markets. People are competing for those different materials. We were talking last night about sustainable sporting goods. People are making, soccer jerseys out of plastic bottles. We're competing with the people who want to make plastic, water bottle soccer jerseys to get the bottles back to put into our bottles again. So it's a really complex web. It's actually probably better than a single loop. If you look at, what's a robust supply chain, it's really a web of, a number of suppliers and a number of competing buyers. So from that standpoint, it's probably better, but the complexity to be able to get high quality recycled material to put back into bottles is something where we work really closely with Pepsi and some of our other customers, and they've made a commitment to have at least 10% recycled content in all of the bottles that they provide in the United States. We try to support them, and we're working closely to see how do we get from 10% to 15%, up to 20, 25%. And when we get to that level, today only about 30% of the bottles that are bought in the United States actually make it back into the recycling stream. So when we start approaching that 20 and 30% number, we also have to start looking at how do we get more bottles back. So I'll make a plug today. You have some Gatorade bottles and water bottles here. There's a recycling bin in the back, and there's another one outside. Probably one of the best things that you can do to improve the environmental footprint of the bottles is make sure they end up in the recycling bins. Something else that we've done in terms of supply chain is look closely at where we locate factories and how we cooperate with our customers. If you can imagine, shipping empty bottles is really inefficient. There's a lot of air on a truck. If we can move our factories closer to our customers, then that eliminates a lot of the transportation. And we've actually gone so far as to creating either on-site or near-site bottle blowing manufacturing sites. So what you see here is a site that's in Wytheville, Virginia. This plant right here is a plant that's bottling Gatorade. This is the bottling line up here, and this is their warehouse and distribution. This is the Amcor Rigid Plastics plant where we make the bottles in this area. We have some warehousing here. And between the two bottles is actually a tunnel where automated guided vehicles will pick up the bottles in our plant based on the orders from our customer, drive them across, and set them right at their filling lines. So by doing this, we've been able to eliminate about 80 shuttle trucks a day that would have been running back and forth between these two plants. And you can see some of the calculations of the environmental benefits of that right here in terms of reduced greenhouse gas emissions from the diesel trucks, energy efficiency, those types of things. So this is one example. We also have what we call on-sites where the lines are actually right inside of the manufacturing center. So the bottles can be made and delivered to the filling area in a really efficient way. And then another example, and I think this is a really interesting one, this is from Europe, where we make a number of the bags for walkers and other products that are snack products. We've worked with our customer, in this case again PepsiCo, on something called the RECON program. It's resource conservation. And it started out as a program where we would share information and they would share information, and we'd compare how do we become more efficient, perhaps looking at the results of installing LED lights or buying different chillers or different types of equipment for the plants. But then it's really moved beyond that. If you look at a printing operation today, typically you have a gravure printing press that'll be set up for a particular line, and it'll have maybe 8 different colors on it based on the type of package that we're going to be producing. And every time we change over, we have to change the inks in that because the colors of the next package may be different. And what we've been able to do by working together is come up with a 4 or 5 station press that uses standard color inks, and all of the packaging uses those same types of colors. We're able to develop some techniques to get more flexibility with that. And then the types of substrates and the widths of the substrates we're printing on were standardized to a few. So we've been able to minimize the number of changeovers, minimize the scrap, minimize the amount of ink we've had to throw away during changeovers, minimize the scrap that you have at the beginning and end of every roll as you change things over. So there's been a huge savings both in cost efficiency and in environmental impact of scrap and waste by harmonizing these designs. And I think that's a real opportunity where a lot of times we miss, because we have a group of designers who design something in their bubble, and then we go out and see who can build it. And the more collaboration that we can have between design, manufacturing, and then downstream, I think that's a really, really powerful example of what we can do in terms of improving circular economy through doing that collaboration upstream and downstream.
Okay. Moving right along here. So we just got the packaging perspective. So we are happy today to have Dennis Donnellan here, who is Senior Director of Customer Supply Chain Integration with PepsiCo, to talk a little more about the manufacturing role in the supply chain. And I will let Dennis take it from there.
Thank you, Gary.
Very good.
So there was a metric you had, or you made a point about value creation, value destruction, and it does happen every day. I'm trying to sell more Pepsi than Coke is, so I'm trying to destroy their business as much as possible. So drink up on the Gatorade, the Aquafina, the Tropicana, and the Life Water. I appreciate it. But there is one economic law I live by and actually believe drives a lot of the decisions that I see within PepsiCo and across the business, and that's pretty simple. Change happens when the price of not changing is greater than the cost to change, or the reward is greater than the invested cost required. Now, if those aren't clear to people, nothing happens. People just kind of sit in that comfort zone of today. So to your question about how do you get more recycling, the young woman here in the back row, if your facility isn't doing it, there's actually a business solution coming forward. There's this single stream waste recycling process where it doesn't matter if you got it into the right bin, doesn't matter if it got into the trash or if your landlord brought it to the right location, ultimately it's going to go through that same single source sortation. We're going to try and capture as much of the plastic, the aluminum, paper as possible. So there is a solution coming. It's a business model. So someone saw the need for change, someone saw the value of investing to drive that, and they're actually trying to bring those forth to the communities. So there's hope out there. Innovation is what's going to drive those solutions. Okay. Also, having great partners like Amcor is going to help us understand things we may not see, or we may not be aware that someone else unlocked that we can take advantage of. So continue to think about that, even in your own personal life, right? Am I making a decision based on, I think there's a reward for me by doing this, or if I don't do this, I'm going to pay a price I don't want to pay, okay? And if it's that clear, most people won't do anything. So I've been in the industry 33 years, and I've learned a lot. Started off calling on retail stores first in sales. Never realized at the time, though, I was actually part of supply chain, okay? Through my career, I've tried to leverage all of my insights from day one to today because it's really important to understand what's happening. What am I doing upstream, and how's that actually going to deliver the final result to the consumer in our world? So for all of you students out there or people back getting re-educated, continue to think about how you build upon your experiences, whether it was some job you had before you started with the next company you go to, or the role you're in and how that really contributes to the overall end process. Because if you don't understand the process, then you're probably not doing as well as you could do or as effective as you could be. So I'll quickly try to cover off who PepsiCo is, because a lot of times people just think it's Pepsi soda. Actually, we have $22 billion brands that we sell globally across 200 plus markets and territories, countries and territories around the world. We are $66 billion annual revenues. And the ones I have circled at the bottom are the ones that my division, North American Nutrition, are responsible for. Ones you're consuming today, Gatorade, Tropicana, Quaker Foods and Snacks. We also have joint ventures with Lipton Tea, which is part of Unilever and Starbucks, to market and distribute their products through our warehouse chilled network. In addition to this, we're becoming much, much more dependent upon other parts of the world for our ingredients. It's becoming much more important for us to understand how we're bringing those ingredients into our country, whether it's stuff we use to make our Gatorade and Pepsi and how that gets there, whether it's by boat or by air. By air is a lot more expensive. Or the lead times required to ensure we get the products to our facilities so we can produce it with the right freshness, the right quantities, the right blends and things we need to make the consumer products achievable in a way that's cost effective but also sustainable. Because when there's a problem in a part of the world that I woke up in Chicago and didn't realize there was a typhoon in the Philippines and our coconut water's not coming, that's a problem, right? But how do you get ahead of that? How do you resolve those things? So it's becoming much more complex. As a network for North American Nutrition, mainly United, a lot of plants and manufacturing facilities across the country. Our foods network, you can see, is pretty much where the corn and the oatmeal is grown. It's in the Midwest, right? That requires a lot of planning, a lot of collaboration to get it to the marketplace, as far as our different distribution centers that we have decentralized around the country to try and be more efficient. We've had this model for the last 30 plus years, which has worked for us, but there's continued opportunities to improve it. And it really requires us to work very closely with our partners, whether it's our manufacturing partners like Amcor or CHEP pallet, because they have to have the right pallets for us to have the right products, but also our end customers such as Meyer to make sure we have the right plants in place to have the right products where he needs it for his distribution centers. We also have 9 club mixing centers where we use a lot of manual labor to repack products, along with our 10 Gatorade plants and DCs that you can see are more dispersed around the country because it's much more logical to go where the water is, go where the consumer is, because heavy liquids cost a heck of a lot more than light oatmeal or cereals to ship around the country. So that was one of the things we did as part of our model, but it too has its opportunities. We have 3 chilled manufacturing facilities, 4 chilled distribution centers, and we've got different facilities across PBC that we use for co-packing, and we also have seasonal DCs for our Gatorade products. The reason for that is we sell about 10 times more Gatorade in July than we do in January. So we have to build inventory to have it in the right place at the right time to meet that demand. These numbers are our 2016 numbers, which just ended at the end of the fiscal year. You can see how many customers we serve, how many cases we ship, how many orders. And it takes a lot of planning to make this possible. Because if we don't have the right product, the right place, right time, we're going to waste effort, we're going to waste energy and resources, we're certainly going to risk wasting product because it'll go old age. Our Gatorade product has about 9 months of life at time of production, so that's a little bit easier to manage. However, our Tropicana has 65 days at time of production. We guarantee 30 days or more to Mike and his stores once we deliver to their warehouse. So we've got about 30 plus days to make the right calls as to what packages are going in. We're going to ship it up to Jersey City, we're going to ship it up to Cincinnati, we're going to ship it out to Walnut, California, and in what quantities, what flavor mixes. Because if we get it wrong, there's something being wasted along the process. So it takes a lot of coordination and collaboration, and certainly a lot of energy to operate. As a company, our purpose is to try and not only drive top-tier financial performance for our shareholders and across all of our brands, but to also integrate our sustainability strategies into our business processes. And I'll tell you, we're blessed to have a leader such as Indra Nooyi, who's really helped us drive this, because she's really kept it forefront. It wasn't hey, it's a great idea to do this year, it'll sound great with Wall Street or the media, and then forget about it and not really mean it. She's really made it important. It's something we couldn't walk away from. It took her perseverance, her leadership, and her passion that really has embedded it in all of our processes, all of our teams. Every team, whether you're in HR, finance, supply chain, sales, has some type of metric in their business goals to speak about what are they doing to support our sustainability efforts. And sustainability could be the kind of products we make. It could be how we're using our human resources and capital. but certainly our business processes and the footprint that we're leaving upon the economy. Okay? Over the next decade, we have 3 pillars we're focusing on. One is how do we make our products more nutrition, more beneficial for the consumer, and use less materials that are certainly in short supply, use them much more effectively. How do we protect our planet? And how do we work with people to empower people to make better decisions to help find the solutions we're all going to need? Some of the stuff we were talking about before about recycling. For supply chain, protecting our planet is really the most important part. It must be first because we need our natural resources in order to be effective. And for our supply chain, there's a lot of objectives we've got that we're trying to drive through 2030. The biggest one that's going to be, oops. Look at there, let's try to get this star. So 93% of our greenhouse gases are with processes we don't directly control. It's the support we get from CHEP, the support we get from Amcor, the partnership we do with Meyer, the growers that provide our oranges, our oatmeal, our corn products, or any of our sweeteners that we need to make our products. In order to really capture the goal that we're trying to strive for, 20% reduction by 2030, we have to start asking questions about our own processes, about our partnerships, what they're doing, and what they can help us unlock or do differently as a team. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to achieve that goal. And for me personally, and for everybody at PepsiCo, Andrew's holding us accountable to that. Our long-term incentive plan is tied to some of these objectives. So if we're not really focusing on stuff today, there's no way we're going to make our long-term goals in 3 years or further out. It takes a lot of coordination. It certainly takes a lot of facts. I had a former boss that used to say, in the absence of facts, he liked his opinion better than mine. That kind of shocked me the first time he said that, but I've stolen that now from him, but I give him credit all the time. But think about that. In the absence of facts, people are going to act the way they think they should act. And from my experience throughout my entire career, it's having that information, those facts, which has really made me much more impactful, much more capable as a manager and a leader to make decisions that might have been frightening to think about without the facts. When I first came into the industry, we did not have access to information. Wendy and I were talking about, for anybody who is younger than my kids, a service called SAMI, Sales Area Marketing Information, which used to come on sheets. Microfiche sheet is like a black, negative for a photograph. You don't even know what the hell I'm talking about there. But Google it, you'll find it. But that's how you used to get information. And being the youngest guy in the New York sales district, where I was right out of college and everybody had 20 years or more experience, they had 20 years of knowledge on me as far as what took place in that marketplace. But what I knew was the same knowledge if I was able to harness that and understand it. So it's really trying to capture all the data you have available to you and start to find strategies and tools and processes for how you harmonize that data, how you understand that data, turn it into strategies or insights that you can learn from. Because that's really how you develop knowledge. So the more we can bring facts forward, the more all of us can understand what's happening up and down the process, is how we can unlock the value stream. For us at PepsiCo, working with Amcor, it was very important for us to understand what they could do to lightweight our bottles. But we couldn't do that in a vacuum. We had to understand what did that mean for us from a manufacturing standpoint, from a warehousing standpoint. Because there's no value gained if the effort I put into make the plastic bottles lighter, which would help procurement, would help some other goal, failed because now pallets were falling apart, cases were falling apart, the consumers weren't happy. If you have any of the water bottles, some of you might remember when Aquafina first came out with the Echo bottle. We took out 50% of the plastic. My wife hates that bottle because every time she opened it, the water would squirt up. Well, we had to go back and solve that, right? So it's great that you can do something, but make sure you're really solving the problem in a balanced way, not just solving the problem that you think is important to you because of what your facts are. Understand the broader facts, understand the broader impact. You can also drive incredible change if you've got the facts and you're helping someone else who's critical on that decision understand the facts for their own area that they may not be able to harness or understand. That's how you bring people along, because a lot of people are going to be stuck in their ways, right? The building manager doesn't want to blend the bags, doesn't want to make a phone call. Someone doesn't want to change a process because they don't see the value for them, and their boss isn't telling them to change the process. It's you being able to bring forth that kind of information, those facts, that allow you to unlock value and unlock the reason why people should invest or embrace the changes that's being attempted. That was a project, perfect example of that for me was our 32-ounce Gatorade case, which came in an enshrouded case, which we had this incredibly stupid process behind, because we would make cases that didn't have the full shroud, so we could actually bring them to our DCs to then have them built into display mods that we would sell to Meijer and other stores, which meant we had to carry about a third more inventory than we really wanted to or needed to in order to make it easier to stack cases to go on display into a store. Versus if we said, all right, let's try and put this in a shrink wrap tray. Let's take all that cork out, save all that material. Let's save all the handling and the redundant inventory that if we're calling it wrong, and oftentimes we were calling it wrong, we'd have to dump or donate some of these products because we couldn't sell them the normal amount. We're able to streamline our processes and save $10 million annually. A lot of that was enabled by what Amcor was able to help us do with our bottles, because some of our cases we needed to change the bottle. But it was that end-to-end. It took actually about 19 line items of productivity opportunities in transportation, labor, packaging, material, selling costs, downstream waste, and that unlocked that value. Without those facts, that project never would have gotten green-lighted, never would have happened. Okay? So having the facts and having the information and working with your peers in a collaborative fashion is what can really drive the change that we're all going to need as a society. Real quick on sustainability from a global standpoint. So these are trends that were created by Capgemini as well as Unilever, PepsiCo, P&G, and some other global retailers back in 2012. So these are trends they identified in 2012, and I'm sure most of you, if you can read the screen, you can identify many of these are very much present today. Okay? From a supply chain standpoint, we're not only looking at what we have to do from our own internal sustainability goals, but we're also looking at what's going to happen to our business model that we have to plan for and be prepared to embrace, because it might be driven by consumers, might be driven by communities or local governing bodies, or it might be driven by just sheer reality of availability of resources. From a supply chain standpoint, these were the 8 that we thought really impacted us from the supply chain. However, if you think about it from a sustainability standpoint, there's a twist on each one of these with sustainability. I'm going to call it some of them. Increased urbanization. In Chicago, we went back about 10 years ago, Walmart was able to really touch about 2% of any consumer in the Chicago area with a store within 1 mile of a Chicago resident. Now they're able to capture 65% of their volume because of what they've done to move into the marketplace. Meijer's doing the same thing in many urban areas as well as other retailers. As more and more people start to live in these city centers that are getting bigger, how products get to market are going to change. It's really causing us to think about, all right, well, I have a case, I have a pallet, I have cartons in a case. Am I sending the right product, the right size, the right package through that channel, through that marketplace? How much material is being wasted in that process because it's not working? People are hand-holding stuff, or people are breaking down things into more economically feasible package sizes. How do I embrace that? Because there's a cost being absorbed somewhere. So if I'm not anticipating what I can do upstream to embrace that trend, then I'm going to have a cost that I'm going to have to pay out of pocket that's going to inhibit my ability to drive innovation or drive other growth opportunities. Think about growing consumer concern about sustainability. All of you consumers, we talked about it. If you look at packaging today, there's packaging that calls out how recyclable they are, right? And we all have purchasing habits that go around that. No different than anybody who has a need for gluten-free, or anybody has an interest in non-GMO type products, or low calorie, or whatever it might be, right? Organic or natural. The same thing with recyclability, same thing with sustainability, same thing with that image of what's the manufacturer doing that's impacting your life in a way that maybe wasn't thought of. Scarcity of natural resources. This is true, and this is really when I had the sentinel moment why sustainability for me was something I needed to really wake up and open my eyes to. In around 2006, 2007, the city of Atlanta had a major drought that was going on for its second year. They're down to 90 days of fresh water reserves left in the city of Atlanta. Unfortunately for us, the largest Gatorade plant at the time was in the city of Atlanta. Not all the cases of Gatorade we produced stayed in the city of Atlanta. Much of it went elsewhere in the state, and even more went out of the state. So if you're the mayor of the city of Atlanta and your residents are, basically not have any drinking water in 90 days, or you're going to disappoint Gatorade from having to shut down the plant, what decision would you make? Now, fortunately for us, that didn't happen, but the wake-up call for us was, how do we become part of the solution and not be seen as part of the problem? It made us really understand, well, what's going into our processes for how we manage the bottles, how we clean the bottles, how we fill the bottles, and what we do with water. Right? How much fresh water do we use through the process? How much water are we using through the process? For 1 gallon of Gatorade, how much water do you think? Who thinks we use more than 2 gallons of water? About more than 2.5. It was over 2.5 gallons of water for every 1 gallon of Gatorade. Okay? We've now worked that down because we've gotten smarter on what's going on in the process. How do we understand where we're using water? How do we understand what's happening to that water? How much is that water costing us? Right? How much is that water costing us to go back to the water treatment facility? What's the economic value if we didn't use that water? What's the economic value if we were able to reuse the water that we could treat ourselves? So we brought a business model to it and understood not only what we were doing to avoid the risk for any future challenges like that, but elsewhere, how can we scale that up across all of our manufacturing sites, not just catering, anywhere we're using water in any of the process. So natural resources, if they're not, readily available, you're going to pay a price. And if there's a risk as far as a drought in that situation, you might pay a deeper price than you could think. There's also a legacy price here. As we look to expand our network, we're much more sensitive and aware of, well, what are the water needs we have for our plant? What's available in the community? What are the issues the community might have? What's the receptiveness for our plant? You would think everyone would love a manufacturing facility that would have 500 or more employees working in their community. Not always true. Sometimes you get different responses. When we were seeking a permit to build a plant recently, we were told the price to tap into their water was going to be as much as what it would cost us to build the plant. Okay? So there's a lot of things we really have to get in front of and understand, all right, am I willing to take that bet knowing I could use less water or improve my processes, or do I have to go somewhere else? But more importantly, how do I change even people's perception of us as a manufacturing facility? Certainly the regulatory pressure. We have different laws being popped up across the country to address different things. They're not always, they all have great positive intent, but sometimes they're not always well thought out as far as what's the downstream impacts. So I think the more we can help be part of the solution for what's the right way to think about certain laws or the right way to support it in a way that's scalable for everybody, I think would be great. Because certainly there's going to be regulatory pressure as communities and states and local governments look for ways to solve their problems. They're going to look to manufacturing or business to be part of that. Sometimes maybe in an abrupt way, many times in a very good way. And the last one, and I think the most important one here, is all of us in this room with the technology we have in our laptops, our iPhones, everything. That's the game changer. That's what makes me optimistic, right? All of us have access to facts that when I was your age starting college, didn't really have. We didn't have Google. We had the library, we had Britannica America, right? But you had the local news agencies that had information that they would track, but we did not have it. So the more we're able to tap into that information to educate ourselves on what's happening, how am I contributing to it, am I part of the problem, am I part of the solution, you're going to keep business honest. And back to that rule of economics I told you about. The more we're trying to sell products to you, if you think we're an evil empire, you're not going to buy our products, right? So the price of not changing how you perceive us is going to cost us dearly. So I'm very optimistic with today's technology that more and more of these facts are going to come forward. And the more all of us know those facts about our own lives, our own habits, I think it's going to be the momentum that's going to drive some of this change. I think that's it. Oh, last slide. So, key things. We can't do anything we're doing without collaboration across Amcor, Meyer, and our peers with CHEP, and even within our own teams across sales, marketing, and supply chain. So collaboration is key. So learn how to be a good team member. Learn how to work with teams that maybe you don't even know. Okay, practice that. That'll be more key to your success in the future than anything else. Establishing a vision and purpose. Without Indra's vision, without her purpose, without really setting that bar, we wouldn't be achieving the things we're doing because we would just keep doing what we were doing. More importantly, set goals and execute a plan. If you don't have goals, you don't have any way to measure whether or not you're succeeding or achieving what you said was your vision, well, you're never going to get there. You'll get wherever you get. Okay? So those three things are what I see as the key.
All right. I want to bring out here Mike Graham, who is Senior Vice President, Supply Chain and Manufacturing at Meyer. And so just to keep, in case anyone's keeping score here, so we've heard about packaging, we've heard about manufacturing, and now we're going to have Mike give us a little bit of perspective on what happens when the retail store gets involved. Mike?
Good morning. Much. Can you turn off that other? There you go. Again, my name is Mike Graham, and I run the Supply Chain and Manufacturing Division for Meyer. And I'll start off, I'll give you a little bit of information, tell you about Meyer and who we are and what we do, and then talk a little bit about our sustainability initiatives and how we really close that circle, basically, that we've been talking about in terms of that circle economy, and try to bring it back. Bring it back into fold. So let me give you a little bit of information, elaborate a little bit about Meyer. So Meyer Founded in 1934 by Hendrik Meyer. Today, the company is run by the third generation, three brothers, Hank, Doug, and Mark, run the organization, or at least oversee the family assets is really what it amounts to. The company began as a grocery company, and that's a little bit of a misnomer because Hendrik was, at first, he was a barber and got into the grocery business because he needed to rent some space next to his barbershop that he owned, and it was in the middle of the Depression, and nobody would rent the space from him, and the bank didn't want the building back because they couldn't do anything with it, so they wouldn't even foreclose on it. So he got a loan and bought some groceries and started selling groceries out of that space, and then that is what eventually generated into a $20 billion a year organization. So it was kind of an interesting little start as an entrepreneur. Meyer is also credited with creating the supercenter concept. Walmart took it and exploded it, but Meyer was the first one to actually create it back in 1962. Today, Meyer, our footprint is 6 states. We are a regional grocery company. We have a little over 70,000 team members, 230 stores. We'll add 7 stores this year in that same geography. And then our distribution facilities and manufacturing facilities are dotted throughout that network to support all of our stores. We are a little unique in retail in the fact that we are also a manufacturer. So most retailers would buy products strictly from vendors for resale and all the rest. We have also gotten into manufacturing. We've been doing manufacturing for a little over 20 years now. We don't make Pepsi or Gatorade or anything like that, but but we do produce a fair amount of milk and all of the dairy products, fresh produce. We have a packaging plant for fresh produce, roasting facility for nuts and fruits and all of those types of things, and then a deli and a bakery that we also operate for fresh, primarily on the fresh side of the business. Here is a quick map of our footprint of where our stores are, as well as our distribution and manufacturing assets. So when you think about a retailer, stores obviously populated throughout our region, we want our distribution facilities to be as close to those stores. We're obviously supporting the stores on a daily basis with product. And the closer that we can have those distribution facilities to the stores, obviously the faster we can get there with the least amount of resources employed to do that. And then our manufacturing facilities, for the most part, are co-located next to our distribution centers. So you heard a little bit earlier where David has put his production facilities right next to some of the Pepsi production facilities, eliminating a lot of that travel and shipping of air and those types of things. We do that exact same thing with some of the products that we manufacture and get them into our stream of commerce. This is a picture of Fred. So Hendrik started the company in 1934. His son, Fred, really grew the company into the organization that it is today. And Fred was famous for quotes and all the things that he did throughout the year. He would walk through stores and he'd throw quotes out to people. And eventually somebody started writing a lot of these quotes down and actually created a number of books with quotes from Fred. It was this gentleman, Fred, was literally a gentleman, was one of the most good-hearted people that you'd ever meet in your life. Really believes strongly in community, in giving back. The company still to this day gives back over 5% pre-tax profits every single year. Gives back every year more money than most of us will ever make in our lifetime. Most of it is invested in directly into communities, community activities, charities, whatever it might be, all throughout our network. Fred, if you ever have the opportunity and you're ever in Grand Rapids, visit the Fred Meyer Gardens. So one of his philanthropic endeavors was to create the gardens. And it's an absolutely wonderful facility, has over 1 million visitors every single year. You can go and walk the gardens and take the tour of some of the most beautiful flowers. There's a Japanese garden. There's all kinds of things within the gardens. Great place. So Fred used to throw these quotes out: "To be a good company, we must be a good neighbor." He believed that, and he started in the business back in the 40s, before it was really fashionable or popular to be sustainable. He just believed in doing the right thing. That was all part of his makeup, the way that he was put together. And he's well liked throughout the entire organization. Passed away a few years ago, but you still hear stories of Fred and Fred-isms. He believed that we should be good stewards, not only of our business, our communities, but also the planet. And again, he was an early adopter before it was fashionable or popular to be sustainable. And those values really emanate through the entire organization and exist today. So let me share with you a few of the things that we have put together in terms of key initiatives and how we approach sustainability within our organization, and really try to tie some of the loop together. If you think about what we do, we sell groceries primarily, but we also sell general merchandise on the other side of the store. And the products that we sell obviously are consumed every single day. We sell a full mix of products on the grocery side. So fresh product as well as packaged product, what we would refer to in the industry as center store type of product. When you think about the variety of products that we have, from the fresh side, you've got things that are produce and fruit and all those types of things that are naturally grown. In wherever possible, we will try to source that product as local as we possibly can. So in those cases, we work with local growers, local farms, whatever it might be, to bring that product in. That product, for the most part, does not have a very long shelf life. So it's coming in to one of our distribution centers. It's going out either that same day or the following day, hitting the stores and then being sold as quickly as possible. One of the things that we work very, very hard to do when you think of recycling is we try not to recycle product, because we want to sell it. We want to use it. We don't want to even create the opportunity for recycling. So in our manufacturing facilities, we're bringing raw product in, and we started this probably 1.5 years ago, where product was coming in and it was being manufactured into other products. So raw ingredients are coming in, and you generally have some form of waste stream that comes out of the manufacturing process. So we started looking at some of the things that were occurring, and I'll use one as an example: broccoli. As we cut broccoli and we create these trays for consumers, for party trays, all those kinds of things, we had the residue of broccoli, so little pieces of broccoli. And rather than throwing that away, which is what we used to do, we actually used to compost it. Now we package that and we sell it as an ingredient. So it's now a soup ingredient to be used. So there's obviously a benefit to the organization to do that, a financial benefit to the organization, but it also pulls product out of the waste stream. So we really said, as we started thinking about that, we said, okay, well, there's got to be a lot more opportunities for us to do that. How do we take product out of that waste stream completely, so that we don't even have to worry about recycling it or composting, whatever it might be. So that's really started and reinvigorated some of the things that a couple of years ago in our focus. And let me share with you some of the strategy and commitment that we have put together throughout the organization to align our sustainability strategy across all business units. So within a retail operation, obviously we've got our central office, we've got our distribution assets, the support assets, but the stores are really where we have the biggest footprint. With 230 stores around the chain, we've got to get everybody activated in terms of aligning around our entire sustainability strategy, because at the stores, we also manufacture some product. We will actually cut and produce product. We sell lots of product, and then we also receive product back from consumers. Some of it is actual product, good product, but some of it is recyclable product. Somebody brought up the question earlier in terms of deposits, deposit laws for cans and plastic bottles, all the rest. Well, Michigan happens to be one of those states that actually has that law. And we receive all of those products back into our facilities, our stores, and then get them back to the recyclers from there. So it's actually a very big operation inside of our stores. We've established a sustainability council throughout the entire organization, again, to align our folks, and then really develop performance metrics and goals for everybody within the company, all the different business units that we have. We find that visibility is key to it. 99.9% of the people in the world, especially within our business, we believe, want to do the right thing. And if you give them visibility, provide the metrics. I learned a lot just listening to David earlier about plastic bottles and compostability, all of those kinds of things that changed my opinion on things, quite honestly. So the more you learn about things and the more we give people that information, they will generally make good decisions for the environment, for the business, for the team, for the community, all of those types of things. So the more that we can get that information out there, the better off we all are. And one of the things that we are not real good at today as a company is we're a very humble organization, so we don't communicate some of the good things that we're doing. And we need to do that a little bit more in terms of getting that information out to our consumers, because all of a sudden you start to create this upswell of people that are doing the right thing, and it has a little bit of an inertia and momentum behind it. So within the supply chain, we are working with all of our suppliers, vendors, whether they're product vendors or service vendors. So thinking from a supply chain perspective, from our distribution centers to our stores, we'll drive over 60 million miles, truck miles, just to deliver product to the stores. We have more than those number of miles on the inbound product, because some of the product that we sell is coming from all around the world. And if you think of the things that are big tonnage, a lot of the produce, even though we source as much as we can locally, a lot of the produce still comes from California or other parts of the world. So there's a huge effort that we've put in place in 2016. Very proud to say that we now have all of our inbound transportation suppliers, trucking companies for the most part, are EPA certified in the Smart Way program, and we were one of the charter members way back in the 2005 when it all started. So very happy about that. Continue to drive that within our supply chain. So when we're working with our product vendors, so you heard from Dennis earlier and David, those are the types of things as we collaborate with everybody. We can't do it by ourselves. Neither one of them can do it by themselves. But if we all focus on it and at least have an end in mind, then we can all achieve a much greater end result. So when we are buying product working with our vendors, we think of recycling if we have to. Again, we would prefer not to recycle it because we don't want it to go into the waste stream at all. But where it does have to go into the waste stream, then we're working with the vendors to develop products that can be recycled. And in some cases, it's not just recycled. Some cases, it's reuse. So in our manufacturing facilities, rather than using cardboard boxes to transport gallons and half gallons of milk, we are using crates. So those crates get returned, they get washed, and they get put right back into the stream, stream of commerce. So we've completely eliminated the need for any recycling in that particular case. CHEP is probably a very good example of a product that goes right back into the stream of commerce. Years ago, when it was all whitewood, the product would, or those pallets, would either get put back into the stream of commerce or they'd get turned into mulch. That closed loop that CHEP has, we don't even measure it anymore as part of our diversion rate because it's just part of the way we do business, and we focus on other areas in terms of where we can make improvements in the organization. So when you really look and step back, how do we impact the environment? How do we attack our all the things that we do and the benefits that we can provide to the environment? So again, we're trying to reduce food waste, trying to understand our carbon footprint the best we possibly can. We definitely can do audits throughout the entire organization in terms of the different functions and how do we identify key areas of opportunity. 230 stores, you can have the biggest footprint that we possibly can and bring that product back and centralize any of the waste stream that we can. So you brought up the comment earlier in terms of how do you make sure product gets recycled, even though you as a consumer are doing the right thing and trying to segregate some of your product. We have at the entry to our stores bags where consumers can bring plastic bags back, drop those into a bigger bag. We centralize those, so we collect those from the stores and then we get them to the recyclers, to the plastic recyclers. Works out very well. There's a financial benefit to do that as well as an environmental impact. So it's been something that we've been doing for 5 to 10 years or so. So values-based sustainability. I've got a picture here of all of the values that have existed within Meijer for a long time. And I mentioned Fred, talked about Fred and kind of his view of the world. And he believed sustainability equals community. And it really is. It comes full circle. So we want to be viewed as a good partner within the community for the planet and obviously as a retailer in general. And sustainability can be a competitive advantage in a retail industry where consumers increasingly care about what goes into products they buy and how they are made and farmed. And again, this is an area that we focus on. We've got to do a better job of getting that information out there and advertising what we do, and then the partnerships that we have within the industry. And then when it all comes down to it is how are we doing? Are we living up to the things that we're trying to accomplish? And through all of our metrics, and I just pulled out a couple of these metrics. And we've got every business unit has individual metrics that we track and focus on. I pulled some from our supply chain, from our distribution centers. So over the years, we have been focused more and more on pulling those. The cardboard is going to be the biggest tonnage of product that we get out of the waste stream and back into recycling. Plastic is going to be another one. Think of the shrink wrap that goes around pallets and all of those things, really to try to protect product. So we're sucking all of that product back in from the stores and then getting it back into the recyclers. And we measure what's called a diversion rate. So how can we take product out of the landfill, the stream that's going to the landfill, and put it into the recycling stream, and that's really what we're measuring. We also do generate some organic waste. You know, it's unfortunate, but it does happen. So that organic waste, we don't want to go to the landfills. We want that organic waste to either go to the composter or the biodigester. And we've got a couple of those organizations that we work with. And then obviously the tonnage that we measure and monitor. The majority of that is going to be cardboard. Some of it is plastic. And then the amount of product that we bring back from the consumer, whether it's bottles, cans, all the rest, because of the deposit laws.
So an interesting thing is, as you saw here, we've kind of taken it through the path of getting the product manufactured and packaged and out to retailers. And there's a lot of really good things that are going on. But it can all break down in this final phase with these nasty folks we call consumers who unbelievably have a mind of their own to do whatever they want to do despite what we want them to do. And so we're very lucky today to have Wendy Solomon from Nielsen come give us some beautiful insight into the consumer.
The nasty consumer.
The nasty consumer.
Right. So I'm here representing nasty consumers globally, so thank you so much.
I think consumers are great. I don't know.
They're fabulous. They're fabulous. They're not a monolith, right? So that's one thing we have to understand. So it's really interesting for me to be here because I find myself in a position, I lead our reputation measurement practice at Nielsen. So we help global multinationals understand reputation, equity, and risk. So a part of that is sustainability. What is your company's relationship to communities? How are you in relation with your employees? What is your relationship with your environmental message in the world and sort of the future? And so I think about it from a little bit of a bigger perspective from consumers. So what I'm going to cover today is about, so sustainability doesn't matter to reputation, so this whole thing doesn't matter. It's unbelievably sophisticated what these companies are doing. And then you get down to Jane and Joe. They don't know that. So does it matter, right? Is it building equity? Is it protecting against risk in the actual marketplace? As you think about a policy influential and do I regulate them? As you think about a consumer in the marketplace, should I buy it? That consumer is also an employee. That consumer is also on the town planning board. That consumer is also an investor, right? So we think about consumers in a very generous, open tent way, and I encourage you all to do the same. So does it matter is the first thing. I think that we think about, for every investment, are we getting it back? It's a very reasonable question for companies to ask, are we making money on it? Are consumers willing to dig a little bit deeper for this kind of thing? We're part of Nielsen, and so therefore Nielsen measures lots of things. We know what people watch, we know what people buy, and we know what people think. So I am joining you from the think side of the business, the research side of the business, but we have all of our measurement data that understands the full journey. And so we're also able to say through our retail measurement, are they selling more, right? So it's more because we know there's going to be a gap between what consumers say, oh, this is super important to me. I make decisions based on this, and then they're at the store, push comes to shove, they got 20 things to buy, not quite sure how far that money will stretch. So there's actual stated intent, and then there's actual intent. So Nielsen has a gift and the privilege of being able to report on those both today. And then I think it's a little tone deaf to not think about it in terms of today. In terms of, I spoke at the Sustainable Brands Conference in Boston, I think it was 3 days after the election. Okay, you want to talk about a room, right? So these are people that focus on CSR every day of their life, and they really were in a position of, what does this mean now? What is our job now? And so I think as we think about sustainability, it's really important as practitioners, as people who measure, as people who sell and make, to understand, is it in a different spot now? Is it introducing maybe risk, maybe opportunity? So I think that's an interesting place for us to stop, because I'm really going to close the loop. Right? Fabulous. Okay. So the first question is, and I love the fact that Mike talked about being a humble company, because one thing that we've noticed about consumers is that they care. Right? We used to care about the tomato and every feature of the tomato. We now care about the farmer. right? So this is the percentage of people in various countries around the world that said, you know what, I proactively try to learn about a company before I do business with them. Before I decide to purchase from them, I want to know how they operate. I want to know what kind of company they are. So for all of us who say, oh, I come from the Midwest, I'm very humble, it's not in my DNA to tell those stories, oh, I'm not going to stick my neck out about that, I did that good, but oh, we don't have to talk about it. All right, this is a mandate to say you really should, because by the way, the marketplace is looking for these stories. So stories about sustainability, stories about how you are in relationship with all those stakeholders, right? It's high everywhere. You know, we don't have to get into country differences. The answer is lots of people are looking. So one caveat as I go through, so Nielsen has a really rich battery of research. I pulled from lots of different studies. So this is a study among opinion elites, which is probably that 25% of the gen pop, a little bit more informed. I know among the public it's still super high. So this is a 15-country study. You'll see throughout there are 60 country studies and some are, but I'm just sort of creating a story for you, and I've got more detail on many of them if you want to find me during a break. So it's really clever that we asked our people looking, right, and that we're actually throwing the gauntlet down to companies. You should tell your sustainability story. But then we say, but what do people do about that? So based upon me learning about that farmer as a consumer, am I doing anything differently? And the answer is yes, right? So the extent to which what they learn about you, on the top we ask, so therefore, based on what you learned, did you mention it to anybody? Have you ever proactively said, oh, this company, don't do that because they're behaving in ways that either do align, so it's a boycott or a boycott, right? So, you know, they're behaving in ways that do align or don't align with how you think. So what has happened? All of a sudden the marketplace has become so extraordinarily complex. Every single person has the potential to be an advocate or a saboteur for your business based upon what they learn and the fact that now it's dinner table conversation.
Once you pop that up, yeah.
And interestingly, says the voice behind me, you know, and I think the bottom piece is really the call to action, right? This is really have you decided not to do business with a company based upon what you learned about how it engages in the world? This is the gate. This is that reputation having the ability to do the opposite of creating value, right? This is reputation. We think about it as friction. Right? So can you tell that brand story? Can you tell that story of your product features? And does it just sort of smooth sail through the marketplace and consumers embrace it? Or is there like this crazy static? Like I don't hear that great marketing story because I don't like who you are as a company. And so there, in every market we see, so this is in the 20s, 30s, so let's monetize this. 30-some% of the people have said, nope, sorry, I'll choose a different farmer. Best tomato ever, I'm choosing a different farmer. Right? So here's the story about tell your story. This is the mandate for companies that consumers care about how you engage and that they want to learn more. So again, I mentioned that consumers are not just consumers, but we're also employees. We're students. We vote and we do other things. And so we did a study among future talent in a number of areas. And so I want you to really think about sustainability as an asset. We always think of that downstream holy grail being purchase. I'm not marginalizing that. I just want to park that for a second. Because another downstream impact of sustainability in the marketplace, do I want to work for you? Sort of, I work cross-sector when I go out to my clients and I think, what do you need your reputation to do for you? In the past 10 years, I have heard more about, I need to be seen as a good employer. If I'm going to remain innovative, I sell heavy things in boxes. It's not sexy, right? If I want high potential talent to work for me, what do I have to do? I need my reputation to deliver me that in Brazil, in Russia, in the US, right? When you think about what potential talent wants, they want to work for, as much as they want salary and benefits, they want to work for companies that behave in socially responsible ways, that are good members of the community. So think about sustainability, again, as we share our story, think about it in that broader sense of what it has to unlock in terms of business value. So this is fabulous. People want to know the story, tell your story, but at the end of the day, are people going to pay more for it? So let's think about that from a consumer standpoint. Nielsen, this is a 60-country, this is global aggregated data, which is on an every other year cycle. So this is the most recent that we have. 66% of consumers across 60 countries indicate that they would pay more for sustainable goods. That's a lot. That's 2/3. And it's not just, is it a lot, just, you know, sort of an absolute level, but it's increasing. If you look at that compared to the year prior and the year before that. So what we find is that consumers are on a self-stated basis, via self-report, when you say, are you willing to pay more? Consumers say, yep, and they say it louder last year than they did the year before that and the year before that. How does that break out by region? So all of these, what we know about sustainability, what we know about reputation is that it's dramatically different. Reputation, you own your brand, you can tell your brand story. You got 3 brand pillars, you could do research. Oh, they don't know one of them, you just turn up the volume. You don't own your reputation, right? You don't own this, other people do. They own that lens. And we know the lens through which companies are evaluated varies dramatically by market. So what about this? Are consumers willing to pay more per market? And what you find is that Asia Pacific, Latin America, Mideast, Africa, you've got high intent. We see less in North America. This is, if we think about CSR, if we think about sustainability and your relationship to the environment, and how consumers use that as a lens to make decisions, North America is the market in which it's the least impactful. It's sort of that the voice on the shoulder is not quite as loud, right? A little conscience there. So in North America, sustainability is rarely a direct driver of corporate reputation. Ouch, right? It's truth. There are other things that matter more to consumers. Now, will they pay more? Yes, but this is actually indicative of the role that sustainability plays in your overall perceptions as a corporation, right? So one thing is not just is it a little bit lower, but it's also changing a little bit less. So the momentum isn't as significant behind it. So overall, the global marketplace has indicated a clear willingness to pay more, a global willingness to pay more. But we do know that consumers in North America and to some extent Europe are less likely to be in agreement with that, although still you could say that these are high numbers. We ask a series of questions around, in that same study, around why do you, to what extent does each one have an impact on the final purchase decision that you make? Right? And so you see that in general, you've got reputation being the main thing. So more people say, well, you know what, I just got to trust the company. So that brings us back to what is sustainability's role in reputation. But if you look at the individual elements of sustainability that we're testing, you've got around half or more in some cases saying it's about health and wellness. When we think about sustainability, so again, I have a big tent definition because my definition maps the consumer's definition. If I could think about one thing that's changed in the 20 or so years since I've been doing this, like to be a socially responsible company, to behave in sustainable ways, used to be very environmental, right? That's what the marketplace said. You know, it's all about, it's a very sort of narrow story. Right now, if you think about sustainability, it's a big tent. And that's consumers saying. So if you look at how, in a factor analysis, not to get granular, but how these things loop together, how they link together, they're measuring the same underlying construct. And it loads with ethics. It loads with how you treat your employees, how you are in relation to the environment. So again, I think about sustainability fairly broadly, as do your consumers. If you look at those who are willing to pay a premium, that's 66% of the global population. The idea that a product is from a company that's environmentally friendly is even more of a selling point. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing an intent to pay more, and we're also seeing among those who are worth paying more that environmental message is actually a little bit more compelling than the rest. These are good things when we think about them in tandem, as we try to say how do we build a business case on a most basic level for sustainable development of products. A consumer presentation would not be complete if I didn't use the word millennial. It's a rule in business. We're all very focused on it, so I'm proud to have checked that box. For many of you in the room, it's you, right? This is a different study we did on premiumization at Nielsen, which is just like sort of where are we finding the people with the deepest pockets around the world in the consumer marketplace. And so here we're just looking at 2 age cohorts. We're looking at millennials and boomers. And the first observation we'll say is that millennials, despite, by the way, having less income overall, less income to spend, millennials as a category, as a cohort, are going through the world wanting to pay more for these things, valuing sustainability far more, and it's far more important to them that companies align with their personal values than with their older counterparts. So thinking of that long game, right, this is not going away. Right? So if on a most basic level, this is not a program du jour, right? Sustainability and the idea of incorporating these into corporate values, this is going to be a business proposition that builds value for organizations into the future. I thought it was interesting that we also are able to put this in context with some other things, because it's one thing to say, is sustainability important? Duh. Like, who's going to say no to that, right? But let's look at it relative to quality. Right? All of a sudden you're thinking, let's put sustainability out of that sort of sterile context, and let's juxtapose it with some things that we know are driving some premium prices. And what you find is that the difference between quality and some of these, environmental materials is not dramatic. So sustainability actually holds up as a feature of that purchase experience, even relative to that holy grail of quality when it comes to millennials in particular. There's a lot of eyeballs on packaging. So part of the question we want to ask is how do companies tell their sustainability story, right? We know they're looking. We know that they want to know about the how, right? We know they want to know more about product features, but what are ways that consumers actually learn this? I mean, again, back to the complexity and the work that goes into this. These stories are not known, nor are they going to be told on a package, right? So that's a clear nod to that. But there are a lot of eyeballs around the world on packaging. So therefore, the idea that the number of people saying that I actually check the package to see how these companies, are these companies focused on the type of environmental and social impacts that I care about? There's a lot of people around the world saying yes. So this remains. It's not sort of the claim on the package versus the marketing. Nielsen has done a lot of work around which is the biggest driver in terms of consumers. The idea of these little messages on packages being important to consumers, something that they look for. There's icons there that trigger certain sort of reactions to the product, connect the brand in meaningful ways to things that resonate, they hope, with their targeted consumer. And so these things do remain important. Speaking of important, what issues are important? Right, so what is that little nugget that you tell yourself? As we think about sustainability issues versus health and education and social justice issues, right? And we could argue very elegantly that there's so many connections across those. I get that, right? But if we ask consumers what issues matter to you, this does vary dramatically by country, but here's just a roll-up around the world of those 60 markets that we talk to consumers in. And the sustainability type things are at the top of the list, right? They're generally followed by health-related things, then followed by education, then followed by social justice. And I'm coming out tomorrow, it's a little advertisement here. So the reputation quotient, it's an 18-year running Harris Poll Nielsen work that it actually launches tomorrow. It's released to the media, and we'll see more information on this confirmed tomorrow. What about the actual purchase, right? So one of my first studies I did, I asked people in New York City if they watched Live from Lincoln Center, which of course wouldn't reflect very positively on you. I got like 80% of the people saying they did. So sometimes people say things that just aren't true because it makes them feel good. What are we seeing though in the marketplace performance? Again, back to Nielsen's retail measurement chops around the world. What we find is that as we actually coded products that go to market with a sustainability message versus those that didn't grew at 1%, those with a sustainability message grew at 4%. So that's sort of the biggest I can say to say, so we can look at that intent, yes, I'll pay more, yes, it matters. And we could be a little bit skeptical, but we are seeing movement in the marketplace. We are seeing actual examples of these products tapping into something that consumers are willing to pay more for, right?
Can I ask an academic question about
Uh-oh.
Do you control for size of the product? So like I can imagine like if it's a really big rollout for a large product that's going to go everywhere, sustainability is going to be part of what you're going to put into it. Whereas if it's lots of
I'm sure that they look at the data by that. I have not looked at the data by that.
It's not carved out.
I mean, the products themselves span categories, span markets, and span a number of different other traits that Nielsen measures on. So I think that the number that they're leading with is that. So I'm sure that they do. I don't have that data on how it's different. We do know that most of them have marketing behind them, right? So we're not looking at the most minor of products. So consumers are saying that they want more, right? So they're saying there's not enough here. So that's interesting. So we always look for unmet needs in the marketplace. We always want to know where is the marketplace not delivering? And what we're learning from our work is that consumers are saying, I could use more like this, right? This is the kind of product that makes me feel better. And so here we're looking by region at some of the things about what is it where you wish there was more, and you see those dark numbers across. So around the world, you've got a third or around them saying, I wish that there were more products out there that really exhibited care for the environment, or that were by companies that did those things. So it used to be that I would say sustainability talking to a bunch of like corporate folks, and you'd say sustainability and they'd say report, because the only time you ever heard about sustainability, because there's a sustainability report and you had to do it every year and it was in this little silo on the org chart and you could just lop it off if it ever went away. What we're finding now is that that's not the case, right? I mean, what we've talked about in this loop thing is that it's not the case. It's everywhere. It makes companies feel good. It makes employees. It's extraordinarily important to employee morale. So not just our consumers wanting these things, our consumers wanting to pay more for them, but we're also knowing that companies, it makes them feel right. However, it's not a driver. So bad news, right? At the end of the day, we do all these things and we say we're sustainable, and then we think about what drives our reputation equity, what protects us against risk in fairly unpredictable times, and it's not sustainability. Bummer. So what do? So what we do is we take what we do know to be drivers, as we harvest social media data and we see what people are talking about. We know what drives our reputation. And we take these sustainability stories that we have in our arsenal of stories, and we connect them through the things that do matter. So if what drives your reputation is innovation, let's take this bio thing that you're doing and link it to innovation. Right? Let's tell that story through the lens of what we know matters. So what are corporate communicators doing now, for those of you looking into that? They're trying to build reputation equity and eliminate risk by taking their sustainability stories and presenting them to consumers in a way that actually amplifies something that is the lens through which I evaluate you. So if I'm a mommy blogger on childhood nutrition and you're Pepsi, I got a yardstick in my head that I'm using to evaluate you. And you can tell me whatever you want, but that's my yardstick. Right? So how can we tell stories that are more receptive? The other thing I'll close with is that we're talking about consumers, but I really encourage everybody to think about sustainability and the advantages it has far beyond consumers, right? So the Holy Grail is purchase, but what about these stakeholders at the top? When I have the privilege of understanding what drives reputation, the role that sustainability plays in their evaluation of companies, if I'm a policymaker, if I'm a future hire, and if I'm an investor, is far more significant than consumers. Right? So if you're trying to protect yourself and build equity among those stakeholders, boy, that sustainability story becomes front and center in a more direct way. Lastly, I just think that the current landscape, I mean, if you're reading media, very much about what do I do now? Right? So I have these CSR strategies. How prominent should my CEO be? I've read the phrase poke the bear like 10 times in the media in the last 2 days. Like, what do I do? Do I put my head above the tree line? I'm humble. Do I engage in a conversation? This is what C-suites around the world are struggling with. So certainly all my clients, but I think everyone in general. What is the idea of expertise? What is the role of all that truth that we have, all those facts that we have? So I encourage my clients and companies in general to think about, what is the opportunity? What is the opportunity? I mean, we talked about the question about, I think it came from over here, the notion that, perhaps there's unsustainable policies okay, well, we've been doing this as a multinational company for years. It's authentic to who we are. So what does it mean to tell that sustainability story now when maybe the social safety net is more compromised? Perhaps it's an opportunity, right? So I think that it's a really interesting time for sustainability, for consumer reactions. That's that. This is what I said. Tell them and tell them again. That's what my dad said very early in my career. So, and that's it.
So next up is our conference sponsor, CHEP, and Kim Rumpf is going to speak. And I think what's interesting to have Kim talk right now is when you look at a company like CHEP, you basically see a company that has this unique vantage point to see the entire supply chain. So we've got that today by hearing all these wonderful speakers. But I think Kim can inform us a little more about how CHEP, when CHEP looks at this, what is the key trends they're seeing? What are the drivers, and how does a company like CHEP that plays throughout interact? So please.
Thank you. There's me. So first of all, before I get into telling you the story about CHEP, I think it's really important that we just pause for a moment and reflect on the opportunity that we just had to hear from these amazing people telling amazing stories about the power of collaboration. And I feel very honored to be sponsoring this event, for CHEP to be sponsoring this event, and to have you guys here on this front panel telling your story, because I think this story is proving to us the power of working together. And if we will look across the supply chain in a holistic way, the power of coming together and exchanging ideas and collaborating is going to make the world a better place. And I think that you can clearly see that demonstrated from the stories that we're hearing today, real stories that have real business rationale behind them as well. So before I get into the story of CHEP, I just want to applaud the story that's already unfolded here, because I think it is incredibly powerful. And as we look at this opportunity, which is what I would call it, I think all of us have different roles to play. You discussed a moment ago, Gary, that CHEP will have a unique role to play, just as Nielsen has a unique role to play to tell us what consumers want and how they feel and what they're thinking. Meijer has a unique role to play because you get to touch the consumer. You're the only one out of all of us, really, that gets to touch the consumer here on this panel today. So you're the face of the supply chain to our consumer, and so you get to decide how all of us get represented when that product hits the floor. PepsiCo has huge opportunity with a massive amount of products that you're producing every day to not only touch the consumer in the way that you market and you brand yourselves, but also to produce responsibly, which is absolutely what you're doing. And then you look at a company like Amcor, and you're going to bring us the innovation. You're helping us think about ways to get product to market smarter and faster and more efficiently. So we all have a role to play. Wharton has a role to play. IGEL has a role to play. You are facilitating these conversations. You're helping us think about things in new ways and in more sophisticated ways. So all of us are here to bring something to the table. And I would encourage the students, if you're a student here, raise your hand. So you have the biggest role to play. So we have lots of irons in the fire right now, and you're going to hear all about our irons in the fire. But your role is that you have to take this challenge forward. So this conversation is going to go on for decades and decades, and these folks here are ambassadors, they're forerunners, they're trailblazers, they're doing great things, but there are so many untapped opportunities out in the marketplace. Companies today that haven't even started the conversation about sustainability and responsibly producing and responsibly moving and responsibly selling. So I have a challenge for all of you, which is you're obviously here in this room because you care about this topic, but you're going to have to embrace this challenge. And you're going to have to think a lot about what you do with your future to actually have an impact and make a difference here. I mean, years ago, I made the decision to study to be an environmental engineer, and I started my career with these great aspirations of saving the world. And then I found myself doing a boiler number 4 report in a chemical plant. And I thought, wow, how am I actually going to move this forward and make a difference? And then I was very blessed to find my way to a place like CHEP, a company that's owned by Brambles that has a very sustainable business model, that everything we're doing is about sharing and reusing. So I took the challenge and I found my way to a place where I thought I could make a real difference, where I could have a real impact. But all those early years of learning to be an environmental engineer and doing emissions reports and engaging with the EPA and learning about all of these things was incredibly important. So I encourage you to think about your journey and to be wise about the steps that you take. And if you really want to make a difference, which I think you do, which is why you're here in the room today when you could be doing a lot of other things on this gorgeous day, I think you have a real opportunity to do something meaningful. If you're with an NGO or you're with government or you're setting policy, you also have a significant opportunity to enable the rest of us, to help us in a very wise way and in a very practical and pragmatic way to help us find our way to policies that are meaningful, not harmful to business, but meaningful and good for the environment, that enable us to thrive so that we can do all these good things that these guys are talking about here. So that's your role in all of this, is to help continue this conversation and help us be smart about the policy and the decisions that we make and the way that we engage with our government, our administration. So take that role on. And if you're here with business, I think we have really the largest role to play here, and it's because we have the responsibility. So if you look at, we go back here. If you look at this stat here, $2.1 trillion in annual sales are taking place across the fast-moving consumer goods sector. $2.1 trillion of activity. and that is our responsibility to manage responsibly. Just sitting here across this panel, just the companies that are represented here are $100 billion in sales. So between all of us here, just on this front panel, $100 billion in sales are taking place. So our responsibility is great. And the only way, and you've heard it said before by many who stood here today, the only way that we are going to move the needle is by engaging business and by business moving this initiative forward. So we're honored and delighted to be here and to be a part of this conversation. We're really proud to be partners with all of you. So what is the opportunity? Well, there are huge challenges that lay before all of us that we can see, and many of us have talked about them today. But the consumer goods supply chain is riddled with opportunity, but it's also riddled with waste. And there is tremendous opportunity for us to think holistically about how goods are produced and move through the supply chain in order for us to really think in a step change way about how we're going to take waste out. It's not going to happen in silos. I heard some folks reference that earlier today. We cannot look at this in silos. You cannot look at this by raw material, by packaging, by manufacturing, by retailer, or by folks like us who are helping move goods. We are going to have this conversation together so that we can find the opportunities to take massive amounts of waste out of the supply chain. So at CHEP, I'll tell you a little bit about us because we consider ourselves enablers. So we're helpers in the scheme of things in terms of how goods move through the supply chain. We want to be a part of the story, but we see our role as helping enable others who are producing, manufacturing, selling. We want to help you make your business more sustainable. So that's the role that CHEP chooses to play in the supply chain. And we have a brilliant opportunity to do that. So you guys have seen the circular economy model presented on several slides today with different words in different ways. But the point is, it's about keeping the loop closed. You heard Rubicon talk about it just a moment ago when the young man up there made a comment about Rubicon's model and the fact that you're trying to keep it all in a closed loop. So our loop is about moving goods on platforms that are continually reused through the supply chain. So we have, across our company globally, about 300 million assets, pallets, crates, containers. And right now, while I'm speaking to you, they are being shared across 60 countries. So think about that for a second. There are 300 million assets that goods are moving on. And while I'm speaking to you, they are being shared throughout the supply chain across 60 countries. So the idea here, and you heard Mike mention a moment ago when he talked about the fact that we used to throw away pallets or we used to chip them at the end of the supply chain. The innovation that we brought many years ago was the very simple idea of, hey, why don't we just share this stuff? So instead of Dennis buying a pallet to put his Gatorade on to ship it down to Mike, who's going to throw it away or chip it, the idea was, why don't we all just start sharing this thing and continuing to reuse it? So for us, that evolved from pallets into crates and into containers, and we're going to continue to innovate in this space so that we can all keep sharing and reusing. So to put it in simple terms, Dennis will rent a pallet from me. He will produce his Gatorade. He will put that Gatorade on that pallet. He will ship it either to his DC or maybe he'll direct ship down to one of Mike's stores at Meijer. But one way or the other, that pallet's going to find its way all the way down to Meijer. And Mike's going to take really good care of it. He's going to give it back to us so that we can reuse it again. And we're going to inspect it and sort it. If we need to put a new board on it or repair it, we're going to do that. And then we're going to send it right back to the next guy. And in this case, Dennis might not like me saying this, but it might be Coca-Cola on the next round. So the way it works is everybody just continues to share that platform throughout the supply chain over and over again. And as simple as that might sound, before this idea of pooling shipping platforms, everyone was literally throwing this stuff away or maybe trying to reuse it or resell it in some way at the end of the supply chain. So there is massive waste removed from the supply chain just because we all chose to share. Now, it also makes good business sense because it is a lot cheaper for Dennis to rent that pallet from us than it is for him to go out and buy a new pallet only to use it once and throw it away. So this is about doing the right thing, but it's also about doing the smart thing that's good for business. So there's a real case for why we would do this and why others would want to participate in our pooling model. But there's also really other good reason. So beyond the fact that it's really smart and we're all sharing and we're not wasting and throwing things away, we're also making a massive difference in the environment through sharing. And this is just our simple example. So as I tell you the example of the CHEP business model and how we share and how that reduces waste, I encourage you to think about other ways to share. Beyond the shipping platform, there are so many more opportunities in the supply chain for all of us to start sharing. Sharing in ways that don't create a competitive disadvantage or give up a competitive advantage of some sort. And I think we've now gotten everyone comfortable with the idea that sharing pallets and crates and containers is pretty okay. And I don't think it's going to give one producer of soft drinks a competitive advantage over another. So everybody's happy to participate in that model and share the assets. So what has it done? Just to give you examples of why this matters for the environment and what this can do for the movement of sustainability and to make a difference. Just in a year, those 300 million assets moving across those 60 countries being shared by everyone in the supply chain, 1.4 million trees get to stay on the planet because we didn't have to cut them down to make new pallets because everyone was throwing away their first use, first pass pallets. 2.3 million tons of CO2 emissions never entered the atmosphere because everyone chose to share. 3,000 fewer tons of food are now damaged during transport because it's a better asset, it's a more durable asset, it protects the product on its way to the consumer. So by sharing and using these very durable platforms that were made to last and built to share, food is not being wasted. In fact, 3,000 fewer tons of food was wasted last year. And then to the landfill question that was asked earlier about how do we keep stuff out of the landfill, how do we stop moving waste into the landfill, 1.3 million tons of waste never went into the landfill because those 300 million assets got shared across 60 countries. And that's just our story, that's just our example of how together with something as simple as pallets and crates and containers, who would have thought, but something as simple as sharing those basic ideas, concepts of shipping platforms on shared assets, these are the results that we were able to drive in a 12-month period. So there is no question that there is so much more that we can all do beyond shipping platforms, beyond CHEP's model, if we will choose to share, if we will look for opportunities to partner even with our competitors and others across the supply chain when it gives no competitive advantage to the other guy, why not share? We have no problem when we go to your grocery store sharing the cart and taking the one from the person who just left it on their way out the door. It's a basic concept of sharing, and in many ways it's so natural for us. But yet there are so many opportunities that are untapped. So I just want to tell you a little bit about how we're doing it. So we used to just talk about the platform, and for many years, people are like, yeah, you guys are the blue pallet guys. You know, if you shop at the club store, you'll see them in the rack, we're the blue pallet guys, and you've heard people refer to us in that way. So we really decided a couple of years ago that it was time to take our concept of sharing, this concept of making a difference in the environment, removing waste, and taking it to the next level. So once we achieve those great stats that I went through a moment ago, we want to continue to deliver those, but now we've really taken it to another level, which is to explain now to our customers, to all the players in the supply chain, that we have a very unique vantage point because we happen to be with you through the whole journey, which is really rare and very uncommon. So from the introduction of raw materials into a manufacturing facility, from the movement of those finished goods in that manufacturing facility down to a distribution center, and then often all the way down to the retail store, we happen to be present during that entire trip because our pallet, our crate, or our container makes the entire journey, which is a bit unusual and it's quite unique, and we feel that it gives us a unique, first of all, visibility into how everything is moving. We can see a lot of waste in the supply chain because we've been with it from origin, from raw material, all the way to consumer. So we have actually started now offering our customers solutions beyond the shipping platform, providing you with opportunities to look more deeply at your supply chain, not just within your silo, but how your goods are moving all the way to the consumer. So we are now doing value stream mapping with customers, where we will literally send teams of black belts in to look at the flow of your products through your supply chain. 95% of the customers that we have done this with have found at least 12 opportunities to find more waste and take waste out of their supply chain by just thinking about it and looking at it differently. So we're delighted to do that. We're also working on things like unsellables reduction. So you're moving produce from farm all the way to the consumer, and we're presenting solutions to our customers about how to use crates, how to use containers, how to use our platforms more efficiently to reduce product damage. One of the greatest opportunities that we have found has been around transportation collaboration. So we're kind of a key part in the back of that truck. So how much cube you get in that truck and how much product you're able to move is going to be largely dependent on what kind of platform you use and what kind of packaging and how you configure that on the pallet. So we've started spending a tremendous amount of time with our customers talking about how to cube out trailers, how to get less air in the trailer, how to get more product in the trailer so that you can move more goods to market on less trucks. And so that has been a huge win for us in terms of just helping our customers think about how they're moving product. And because our pallet, our crate, our container happens to be right in the middle of that scene, we have a real opportunity to help you guys do that better and faster and smarter. The other thing that we have found is we also have an opportunity to share transportation. So as you're thinking about the movement of goods, in the old days, historically, everybody's got their own trucks, everybody moves their own stuff, and nobody talks to each other about how that happens, when that happens, and why that happens. Whether it's because you have your own private fleet and you chose to purchase your own assets, or maybe you're out and you're using assets from third-party carriers like Swift and J.B. Hunt and all those great companies that help us move our stuff. What we have come to find and what our customers have come to appreciate about us is there is an opportunity for us to share. So as you guys are moving your product, as Dennis is moving his product down to Meyer, and as that product is moving down, that truck is ready to come back to PepsiCo. Some days that truck is coming back completely empty. So we call that a backhaul. The truck is moving, the goods are dropped off, and then that truck is going all the way back to Pepsi empty. So we have started collaborating with our customers to say, hey, you know, there's a whole lot of pallets back there, and you're about to drive back empty, so why don't we share that capacity? Why don't we remove those empty miles from the road, and why don't we throw pallets in the back of your truck on your way home so that we can continue to be efficient and reduce empty miles and take those empty miles out of the supply chain. So we have done a tremendous amount of collaboration around transportation, sharing fleets. We're even now buying transportation from our customers who have private fleets. So we're helping them utilize their assets, we're helping them take out empty miles, and we're really generating tremendous benefits for both companies. So there are so many things that we're now doing together and so much more that we need to continue to do together. There are real cases for why this matters. Clearly, unsellable goods in the consumer goods supply chain total more than $15 billion annually. So when we talk about reducing damage, when we talk about getting produce from the farm to the retail store to the consumer undamaged, there's a real business case for this. So beyond the idea that it's the right thing to do, and I think we all agree or we wouldn't be in this room today, there is a compelling business case for why we need to make things happen. So we're all motivated and inspired in different ways, but if you need some inspiration, $15 billion is a tremendous amount of inspiration and opportunity for us to do some things better and different. There's also a real opportunity, and I talked about some of these examples already, for us to find more of these. We have been so fortunate to be in the supply chain and to be seen as an enabler, an unbiased party. So you guys are willing to collaborate with us to have the conversation about what do you see and how do we share. The real opportunity is to take examples like this, and I talked about helping a customer who happens to be in the room with us get a lot more product on the back of a truck. In fact, 20% more product on the back of a truck so that they can move product more efficiently to the stores. We work closely with them to find ways to package it differently, to configure it differently, to get it in that truck differently, so that when it comes down to your store, it is cubed out as efficient as possible. 20% reduction. Just by collaborating together on one product, one SKU, how to get into a truck smarter and move it more efficiently. So think about that. One product, one SKU, and we made it 20% together more efficient moving that product to market. This cannot happen with CHEP, just with the customers who are willing to collaborate with us to have this conversation. It is going to take everyone looking across the entire supply chain, every bottle, every product, every SKU, every truck that it is going in. And the only way this is going to happen is if we all collaborate. Every single day, every single conversation has to be about removing waste, looking for opportunity. How do we become more efficient? How do we do things faster, better, and smarter? But there's also a really good reason to do this for the environment. So I happen to be the mother of 2 boys. I have a 16-year-old and I have an 11-year-old, and I have a real responsibility beyond my job at CHEP to move things smart and fast and help Dennis and help Mike. I have a real responsibility to make sure that I leave this place in great shape for my kids. And I am committed to that, and I think all of you are, you would not be in the room today. So these stories that I tell you, the $15 billion, the 20% more in the truck, they actually have a higher purpose. They do have a greater cause. And for me personally, and I think for many of you, that's what this story is really all about. It's about doing the right thing. It's about being responsible. It's about making a difference. When I listen to you talk about your founder of your business and the fact that it was founded on values of community and being a good neighbor and being meaningful, I think that's what this story is really all about. And I don't think we're the only people who believe that. So this is going to be a story about people. We're going to be companies helping influence that, and we're going to be academics helping influence that. We're going to be government agencies helping influence that. But this story is going to be about people who care enough to make a difference. And I care enough because I have 2 boys that are going to be left behind, and they're going to have to deal with this stuff. All you guys over here just took the challenge, so you're going to have to do something about that challenge. You're going to have to make a difference. These stories matter. If you look at the examples that I have given you, just our story, our small story at CHEP about collaborating with our great customers, more than $20 million in savings has been generated for the company. So we can reinvest that. We can do it more and more and more, and it makes good business sense. It's going to make your business more sustainable. $13 million in new revenue sources for our customers by buying transportation from you, by helping you do things better and different. 3.5 million empty miles were taken off the road. Good for the environment, good for business, both. 13 million pounds of CO2. These are just our stories. So if everybody would care enough to collaborate, care enough to share, care enough to tell the stories so that we can have more stories and more stories, these numbers will be exponentially larger at the end of this game. By the time you guys get to it, by the time you're standing here, your numbers are going to be so much bigger than our numbers. If you will embrace the responsibility, if you will take this on and make this a meaningful challenge. It makes great business sense, so there's absolutely no reason not to do it. You can see the numbers here, but most importantly, it's the right thing to do, and it's something that we must do. So this is a call to action. This is a call to all of us, and I know you guys already care, so you don't need the call to action, but we actually have to leave here today and continue to tell the story of sharing. Why sharing matters, the value of reuse. We have to make it personal. We have to make it about connecting and collaborating. This conversation has to become real-time, continuous dialogue about how we're going to affect that $1.4 trillion in sales. There is no greater opportunity than the supply chain. I think we would be hard-pressed to find another place to go to make a difference in the world and in the environment related to sustainability than the consumer goods supply chain. This is where the action is at. So if you guys are looking for a career, you want to make a difference, you're trying to figure out where you go to drive the story of sustainability, the consumer goods supply chain offers you $1.4 trillion in consumer spend for you to help influence and make a difference with. There is a real opportunity for us to make a difference. And it is going to come back to the consumer, and the story that Wendy told is the most important story because it is going to be the story of people, all of us. Not the head of PepsiCo, the leader of CHEP, the founder of Meijer. It's going to be about the shopper, the consumer, each of us when we're at the store, being the mom, the parent, the wife, the sister, whoever we are, we're going to make the decisions about how this unfolds. We're going to decide whether we support the good actors or the bad actors in the supply chain. And you saw the data from Wendy. People are going to support the good actors. The data is compelling. It tells us that it matters. We can rank it and we can decide if quality is more important than sustainability, but over time, that data is going to play out and is going to prove to us, consumers, we, the consumers, the people, are going to make choices about who we support. And I can promise you when this game is over, we're going to support people like the companies that are represented here on this panel. These choices have already been made. Our children are already making those choices. Their conversations and the level of maturity that they have about social responsibility are just light years from the conversations that I was having when I was a child, because I wasn't talking about social responsibility. I wasn't talking about recycling. I did not know what CO2 emissions were. And our kids are having daily conversations about these issues. you guys, I'm sure, are having daily conversations about these issues. So we have a responsibility, we have an opportunity, we have an obligation. And we're just the beginning. So as this day unfolds, I think we're going to do a panel next. I would just like to leave you with a couple of comments. First of all, we're honored to be here. We really consider ourselves as a helper, an enabler, someone who can help you guys make your businesses better. So it's an honor to even be able to host this and have all of you here talking about your stories. So we're excited to be that. And I think that it's important that everyone recognizes their role. Whatever that might be, when you leave here today, you need to understand what your role is in this. Everyone has a role to play, and everyone's role will be different. We are not a $66 billion company. We are a $5 billion company, but we can help the $66 billion company do great things and have a massive impact. So as you leave today, I encourage you to think about what role you play. Joanne has played an amazing role as an example. Joanne has allowed us and helped us find our way here in this room today to have a very, very relevant conversation about sharing and reuse and making a difference. Every single one of us has a role to play in this story. So I would encourage you to think about your role, to understand your role, and most importantly, to continue, as Wendy said, to tell the stories, because it's going to be about the stories multiplying and continuing to grow and develop as we get comfortable sharing with each other. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here. Most importantly, I thank you for being here to participate in this conversation with us. Thank you.
So now you get to see everyone, the whole supply chain laid out before you here. I just wanted to start with one concept for the entire panel here. Something I've heard consistently from everyone is they use the term closing the loop. And we've talked about in slightly different ways. I will tell you, as someone who looks at this across a lot of different industries and a lot of different examples, the hardest job here. Closing the loop is something that you can design a great product, you can get it out into the market, you can tell consumers what they're supposed to do, but closing the loop remains this really tough challenge. Love to hear from any or all, and we can kind of go down the line here, just a little perspective about how your organizations are thinking about this and how, what progress you might be seeing. I'll start over here.
Sure, yeah. From our perspective, I'll look at it in two different ways. Product where we create some waste and have some residual product, that's easier, so we can control that. After the consumer uses something, then it's how do you create convenience? How do you make it easy to drop it in that bin, but then also make it so it is economically viable for somebody to take that bin, get it back, and either reuse or recycle, get that product back in. And I think we've got to just think in that manner, so that as consumers, we're making it convenient for them.
I mentioned earlier that I think there's some interesting academic discussions about sustainability, life cycle assessment, and closing the loop, a circular economy. You can come up with some very circular models that are not very sustainable and have a larger footprint than the systems that we have today. So we really have to be selective and not make only closing the loop the goal. And in cases where it's not necessarily a loop, but as I was saying before, a web of a network is maybe a better solution. If Patagonia is making clothing from our bottles, that's not necessarily closing the loop, but it's certainly a better solution than them buying virgin material to make clothing. So I think it's a lot bigger than just setting one goal of closing the loop.
I would say from a consumer perspective that it's really important to realize that there's lots of different types of consumer, right? If you could think about any variable and we could sort of cluster in different cohorts, there's not one way that we're all the same, perhaps. And so closing the loop with consumers is going to take a nuanced view. It's going to take surgical marketing and education. And by the way, not every consumer at the end of the day this is not their thing. right? So I think that we think we're just going to beat a drum with consumers until they get it. Clearly, they just haven't heard us, you know? But the answer is it's not the lens through which they're evaluating you. It's just not their thing. And so part of what companies need to understand is where is it most important for us to tell these stories, and who's my swing vote, right? Like, who do I really need to get on board? So the idea of a more nuanced approach to telling your sustainability stories, particularly by country, we haven't even talked about by country, it's wildly different. So I think that's going to be really important.
When I think about your question, I think about all the innovation we bring to market. And often one of the complaints I have for us as a company is we do a poor job of really getting the feedback all the way back up to the marketers that created the products that we're creating and selling through Mike's stores and others that maybe weren't successful. And they learn that eventually because it gets discontinued. But what they never learn are all the costs and insights that were gained along the way to understand, all right, should I do that again? Because often they're onto that next project, not leveraging the insights around what made a product successful, what made a product less than successful, what were all the costs that really were part of that if you knew that up front, you never would have launched the item, right? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. So it gets back to the analysis. How do we do things differently that are more precise and certainly more fulfilling of what the consumer's demand really is? Not just because I'm good at filling 32-ounce bottles of Gatorade. Do they need another 35th flavor of Gatorade? Probably not, right? So let's do things that are smart, but let's have the facts that support that educational process.
You know, I think just lastly, I would say, I think the only way we're going to make this happen is if we keep this very simple. And close the loop is a gigantic concept that no one can get their arms around, and it feels overwhelming, and we're never going to get there. I think the key here is that it needs to be about removing waste. And if we will focus on removing waste, eventually the loop will close, because if the loop is not closed, it means that there is waste leaking from the loop. And so I think in order for everyone to actually feel like they're getting something done, we need to think about this in terms of removing waste, removing waste, removing waste. Eventually, that leads to closing loops. But the idea that we're just taking on these concepts of closing loops, gigantic loops that have massive amounts of stakeholders and players and all kinds of complications, I think the key is about being technical about this and looking for opportunities to remove waste in every step of the supply chain or whatever the topic might be. And then we'll have small victories. One little piece of waste or one little opportunity for waste will be removed at a time. And then we'll look back over a period and loops will start closing. And so I would just encourage everyone not to leave overwhelmed with the idea of closing some big loop and we don't even know what's in the loop. So just start thinking about removing waste and taking waste out and being more efficient.
So, Wendy, one of the things that, I remember reading about Steve Jobs saying that, if I asked consumers what they wanted, I would have never made the iPhone.
Right.
And the issue of being in the business you're in, which is asking consumers, can you give us just a little perspective in terms of how organizations can translate what they may be hearing from you or many organizations that are surveying around sustainability and actually bringing it to impacting their products, impacting how they design, innovate, et cetera.
Right. So Henry Ford said people would have just asked for a faster horse, just how to fit that one. I think that, what Dennis just said, part of what research has to do, on its best day, research pulls organizations forward. Right? So we shouldn't be sort of proving that point, feeling good about it. It should be about how do we move forward. And so the idea of data-driven decisions, the idea of sort of sustainability is one of these great conveners in organizations. In organizations, investor relations doesn't always talk to government affairs and doesn't really interact with future talent. And the corp comm guys, they focus on one thing, and the marketing guys are on the product level. Right? That's where the marketing spend is. Right? So all of a sudden, sustainability, guess what? We've now convened the organization around a common theme. And so the idea that your data-driven things are going to drive decisions, and by the way, you're now requiring parts of collaboration that are uncommon in organizations. So I think what organizations need to do is when they get data, be it custom research data such as I deliver, or just the data, like the data on how something worked out. I think it requires new ways of engaging in an organization, be it CPG or in any industry. And so it's really testing limits of how companies interact. I mean, so this whole focus on across a supply chain is in some ways easier because it's new. right? Versus organizations that have worked this way forever, and I got my silo and I don't even know where those guys sit. What town are they in? Like, it's harder for companies sometimes to collaborate internally than it is across the supply chain. I don't know if that's resonating with you, but so I think that's a really important thing for data to be activated, to be not just data looking backwards, but to say this is now a foundation for strategy, and it's a way that we're going to move forward and move our business.
So David, one of the circular economy concepts, and it really comes from the cradle to cradle discussion, to kind of move from the less bad kind of eco-efficiency improvement kind of thing to the more good, and really sort of driving, this discontinuous, if you will, innovation that kind of takes you up. Can you talk just a little bit in terms of how you folks are looking at, R&D and innovation around packaging, and how you look at sustainability for that discontinuous junk maybe?
That's a good question. Part of what you hear people talking about more and more is moving from the focus on their footprint to what they call their handprint, which is looking at the benefits that are being created. And if we look at the impacts of reducing food waste, or improving health of people by being able to provide nutritious food where they may not have had it before, those benefits are, again, much larger than the potential impacts of reducing the carbon footprint of our packages by 10%.
Right.
So to create that beneficial society and virtuous cycle where we're improving the status of everyone, it kind of comes first, and at the same point, then we look at how do we reduce the negatives. But you always try to make the positives larger than the negatives that are being reduced.
So Kim, one of the things that I really love about CHEP, and just sort of your personal ethos, if you will, is about kind of looking at the bigger picture here and looking at the bigger impact. And, obviously there's a lot that is going on in your space that, impacts not just the developed world, but the developing world. And we'd love to hear your perspective a little bit about how you see the changes that you see, the things you want to see happen, and how that can help developing countries develop in much more sustainable ways, provide more food, provide more water, provide all those precious resources we've been talking about.
Well, I think we all have an opportunity to play in this space, and particularly in emerging markets. And so the way we think about our business, at least in new market entry, particularly in developing economies, is the opportunity to modernize the supply chain and to do it right from the beginning. So as we're entering new markets with our great customers, and we normally follow our customers, wonderful consumer goods brands who decide to enter markets, and we come with them to help them standardize the supply chain, to help them move things efficiently. So the first opportunity is to get it right the first time. So we want to participate in that space as we enter emerging markets and really standardize how the supply chain operates, well beyond pallets, crates, and containers, but to just get standardization across distribution centers, into stores, the way that goods are moved, because there'll be massive amounts of waste if these supply chains are not set up in standard ways. So we have a great role to play in that, and we're excited to be entering some of those markets. But also when we talk about unsellables and reducing product damage, I haven't looked at fresh stats lately, but I spoke about this the last time that I was here, and it's known and measured that we're throwing away more food than the amount of food that is needed to feed the hungry. So there is a major opportunity for us to eliminate food waste, to reduce food waste, to get products to market so that they can be sold to those who need it, but also so that the price of those goods can be lower and more can afford it. So there's a tremendous opportunity around food waste and just eliminating food waste and moving goods more efficiently. We are honored to play a great role in that because we happen to be the shipping platform. So it's either sitting on our pallet or in a container or in a crate as it's moving to market. And so we feel like we have a responsibility, not just an opportunity, but a responsibility to help those goods get to market and help them find their way to the tables of hungry people in a fashion in which they can be afforded.
So Mark, the thing that's interesting, as people all alluded, as you've spoken about Myers, you're on the front line. And, it seems to me there are a lot of little actions that occur. Things you mentioned, little actions that are all circular economy concepts. Some things that reduce, some things that pushed more toward the reuse, some extending product cycles. There are all these different things. And I'm just wondering from your perspective, you said you don't do a great job of, is part of the issue that you're just kind of doing things that you believe make your business better, and you hope that the end point in that is the consumer sees that. And how do you like sort of grapple with, like, we're doing all these great things, shouldn't we be the example that they see? I'm curious.
Yeah, and we've had many of those discussions as to whether or not we should be advertising it. And it boils down to doing what's right. Is really where we focus. And if you do what's right, eventually people do notice it.
Right.
Now, I will say we're not good at advertising it, and we're not out there trying to toot our own horn. But in some areas, we do use some signage inside the store, locally sourced. I mean, we'll do some of that, but we're generally not out in the media in a big way, quite honestly. Is there an opportunity to do that? And have there been debates? Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. So on the flip of that, you've got Pepsi, Dennis, which I wouldn't be overstating to say the biggest brand at the table here today. I would take umbrage of that, that description. So with that comes responsibility, clearly. And you have the opportunity to influence people's thinking around this. And by the way, influence your partners because you are the big gorilla. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how Pepsi is using that responsibility and that power to impact the supply chain and be able to impact how sustainability is taken up throughout.
Certainly it's through our overt communication of what we're doing, corporately, globally, with our processes, through our leadership. Andrew Newey is probably the best person to put out there on the television to communicate all those actions. But it's also the embedding of those into our roles and responsibilities and making it a very overt discussion in our annual planning processes as well as our period and quarterly metrics that we report on. And finally, it's allowing people like myself in the role I have to be on a panel like this and to be supportive and demonstrate through our leadership and active engagement and participation with our partners across the board to try and drive things that are small steps forward. So I think that's probably the best way that PepsiCo is doing it. Because in the end, you could use all the words and you can put out all the images, but if people aren't seeing the action, they aren't seeing the results, it's not really resonating.
So for everyone on the panel here, consistent theme today, partnership, collaboration, like little buzzwords, if you're old enough to remember, Groucho Marx, like the duck would come down every time. Said that word, it would be coming down all day here. And I'd just like to hear from each of you a little bit about, how you see partnership and collaboration shaping both your relationship with your consumers in some cases, or how you are working with your customers. And even, Wendy, from your perspective, what is it when organizations are collaborating and partnering for a better good, how do consumers view that? So
I'll start.
Order.
Yeah, I'll start with that. So I think increasingly you find organizations partnering, yes, for greater good, but also for shared risk. I think these days, we see an expanding role of industry associations, right? So as an individual company says, I want to have a point of view on this, it's expensive for me to promote my point of view, or it could be risky, it could be a point of view that perhaps ostracizes a certain part of the population. We see industry associations being partnerships. I think also as companies, we talked about the sort of the skepticism of millennials sometimes as companies, for-profit companies in particular, undergo sustainability programs and let people know about them. There's always a little bit of the risk of are they doing that for the right reasons? And so as they partner with academic institutions, as they partner with nonprofits or NGOs, it becomes about, it gives it more credibility, gives it more sincerity, so to say. And so I think that the idea of partnerships sort of in sustainability as a reputation management. So I'm not being crass there, right? Sustainability for sustainability's sake, doing what's good is right, but it's also an asset that we can talk about from a reputation management sort of unapologetically, right? So as companies strive to tell those stories, they do that in partner with other organizations for a host of reasons, and I think we're only going to see more of that, both to optimize their credibility and also to manage their own risk and to have them speak with a louder voice in some ways.
I'll add just collaboration in general. You can always accomplish a lot more when you're collaborating. I can speak to specific examples where we've collaborated with CHEP, where we've collaborated with Dennis and Pepsi, really just trying to take waste out of the supply chain. And when we take waste, generally it's good for the environment from a sustainability perspective. It's good economically. And generally it's good when you're talking about it in the supply chain, it's good for the consumer because you create speed. Speed is another one that helps. Another element that helps sustainability and the financial benefits that go along with it.
I thought your question was interesting because although we're up here speaking as individuals as part of our organizations, each of our organizations is made up of thousands of people. And even internally, we need to collaborate. There are a few sort of intrapreneurs who are trying to push things forward, and they have to work with the finance people and the R&D people to get a good idea to the point where we can even share it with someone else. And then in between our companies, it's not the five of us phoning each other and talking. It's tens and 20s of people within our organizations working at all different levels to get the collaboration to the point where it makes sense for both sides. So there's a lot of kind of messy work that has to happen behind that neat word collaboration. That, I think people don't realize until you get involved how complicated. Yeah, exactly.
From my vantage point, you think about trust. Collaboration really is what enables trust to be built, repaired if the trust was broken, and certainly to flourish. And it's through that speed of trust that allows things to happen that in the past would have been, that doesn't work for me, right? Because they wouldn't trust the intent for why something was coming forward. So I think in many ways the consumers are benefiting from that collaboration that allows us to bring forth either products from our end that stores like Meijer will stock and sell to the consumers that helps the consumer get a benefit because it's either nutritionally better, the packaging is much more economic or environmentally friendly, or the processes that we're using to get it to market is going to benefit the consumer. Now the consumers may not always see all those dots connecting, so I think collectively as an industry we have an opportunity to tell that story a little bit more broadly, and either through forums like this or through other means, to help them understand how their decisions are also contributing to our decisions. So, one that we haven't really talked about, but you think about the growth of e-commerce. From a sustainability standpoint, I think we have to step back and say, okay, I can sell a package. Hell, I can deliver through a drone a case of beer to some guys at an ice hut in northern Minnesota, because I can do it. But if I were to apply a cost to that for sustainability around what's the carbon footprint, what's the impact on the environment from that activity, net, is that really where we want to go? As e-commerce explodes, as it's available for us to sit here, I'm sure someone in this room has placed an order somewhere on Amazon or somewhere else to have it shipped home. I'm just guessing, right? It can happen. It happens every day at the workplace. But because we can do that, should we be doing that? So how do we get consumers to really understand their role? Because their actions, through what Nielsen is getting back, the words and the actions, is what we're going to respond to. We're either going to do that proactively because we think there's a win for first mover, or we better change because if we don't, they're going to stop buying our products. So I think there's definitely a better messaging that has to occur that not only shares what we're doing and how it involves the consumer, but what decisions they're making that's driving our decisions. Wendy, you have a thought on that?
I agree.
Just to add one thing in particular to what Dennis said, I mean, this is really, again, another big concept. So when you talk about collaboration is the key, then everyone leaves going, well, what does that mean, and how do I collaborate, and with whom should I be collaborating? And so I think another just simple way to boil this down is this is about human-to-human interaction, whether they're all inside PepsiCo or whether some of them are at Meijer and they're communicating with PepsiCo. This is about human-to-human engagement, of building trust, building relationships, creating an environment where people are willing to share things that they might not normally share. So the only way we're going to crack this code, and the only way we're really going to take all that waste out of that $1.4 trillion in consumer spending that I spoke about, is when we all have enough trust with each other that we're willing to share something we would not normally share. The only way that we got to the breakthrough and the collaboration that we had with PepsiCo on getting more product onto the back of that truck was because PepsiCo decided that they were willing to engage and share things that they might not normally share. matter. And that's how this conversation has to begin. So I think it starts with leadership, and I think this is all about the tone being set appropriately. You heard several people here on the panel today talk about their great leaders, their great founders, their CEOs. This is really about leaders setting the tone and sending the message to their people that they expect collaboration, they expect trust, they expect good people doing good things that matter. And if we can create that environment, then I think this exchange of information, this sharing is going to happen, and then we're going to find the waste, and then we're going to close the loop. So I think the best way to leave this particular question is this is about people. And if we can make this a place of trust where people are willing to share for the greater good, then I think we'll do powerful things with collaboration.
I would add on to that. Over my career, I've seen so many transformational things happen because two people talked about an idea
Yes.
that others thought could never happen. Right?
Exactly.
Because that's what they learned. Learned behavior is probably our worst thing. We don't forget what we learned and think about what's possible from what other experiences have been. One case in point, our Captain Crunch business, we still promote it every 3 months, and we sold 85% of our volume in 4-week periods of time because of the deal structure we had. We gave a 7% discount. Customers like Meyer bought it, and they wouldn't buy it again for another 13 weeks, right? Well, I learned through a conversation with my supply chain planner that we were laying off a lot of people at our manufacturing plants because we didn't need them for about 10 weeks in between. And then we'd ramp them up, hire them up, and produce all this. But that whole time, these families, these individuals were being impacted because dad or grandpa or grandma were laid off. Well, a simple conversation with me and a sales manager who was going to meet with was Tops Markets at the time about, hey, can we go to an EDLP pricing strategy? Well, what would happen? Well, we can't do that. We've never done that. Well, why haven't we done it? Because we don't do that. Well, I'd like to try it. Can we do it? And just because in that room at the time we were talking to the customer, their warehouse supply chain guy was there. The category manager says, no, we don't want that deal. We want a better price. And the supply chain guy tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, actually, let's talk about that in the corner because that's really a good idea, and helped him understand. But it was just a small idea that connecting with the right people became a huge idea that saved us millions of dollars, saved the retailers millions of dollars, and we no longer were laying people off. Right? So there was a real human impact to some of the stuff. So all of you in this room have ideas or thoughts or questions. Don't be afraid to ask them. Don't be afraid to share them. Because if we don't share those ideas or thoughts or questions, we're never going to know what we don't know and what might be possible.
Okay, with that prompt, I'm going to actually ask the people in the room here questions that you may have here for the panel so that we can get some answers. Your latest question. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go.
If there were more credible or less third-party certifications on the planet, I mean, wouldn't that really make a difference? There are so many of them when you're, I used to work for the city of New York in procurement and Bureau of Quality Assurance, but I mean, that's an issue. Because if it came down to it would take the burden off the end user totally, that you would know that that cert really meant something, That's how I view it.
Kind of like underwriters, laboratories.
Right. Well, they're doing, what is it, ECO?
Yeah.
But there's just so many of them,
Well, I think the question also is, do consumers actually even pay attention
Right.
to those certifications? And I don't want to take away from your story, but the story basically is they don't.
Right.
With the exception probably of the appliance Energy Star. That may be the only one that they even pay attention.
There's another dynamic at play now is bloggers as well as just social media. People are more apt to listen to somebody else as a consumer versus some of the advertising that might be out there.
That's a good point.
Particularly advertising.
One more question. You touched on compostable, but when I researched that, it was an ASTM that was really hard to meet. So when I see it around, I'm very suspicious of that. Did it meet an ASTM standard?
Yeah, the ASTM D6400 standard is designed to be sure that anything that is labeled as compostable will actually compost in an industrial composting system the same way your grass clippings and branches will, so you don't end up with this half composted packaging at the end of the process. And that's what the composting industry relies on to be able to assure that they can stay in business. it is really difficult to meet. And you'll hear a lot of people making arguments. Well, this is biodegradable, but it takes 1 to 5 years, and none of that's really been able to be proven. California's gone so far as to make it illegal to claim a product as biodegradable unless it meets that standard, which I think is probably a good move, getting back to your issue of trust in terms of labels.
And the FCC also has made it more difficult for you actually to promote it if the biodegradable claim doesn't occur within natural processes.
So for them to claim, is it meeting the ASTM, a lot of these compostable products?
It should, if they're claiming compostable, and we get back to labels, but the BPI label for the Biodegradable Products Institute is basically saying that it meets that ASTM standard.
Okay, thank you.
Question?
Thank you. So I just have like a general question. Like I believe that weather-related events, like climate change, has like a huge impact on the supply chain. As like Dennis touched upon, like there will be issues with respect to supply chain when climate-related events happen. So do you consider those risks, or like do you put that into your calculation strategy as well?
We do, from a manufacturing standpoint, for sure. We have crisis teams that kick in when we know it's becoming hurricane season. Certainly the winter seasons. About 3-4 years ago, we had the winter vortex, polar vortex.
Polar vortex.
That hit us like 3 times in a row. And candidly, we weren't prepared for that. That was a unique winter event that caused a major disruption that just was that much easier to trigger with the next one. When it comes to some of our raw ingredients and products, certainly the stuff that we're getting from far reaches of the world, we definitely are taking those into consideration. We're also dealing with other situations that aren't necessarily weather-related, but could be crop-related. So think about the orange that's grown in Florida. We have a blight down there that it's called greening, which is killing off the trees and making the oranges that we harvest from the trees less capable to be used for our processing, which is requiring us to think differently about how we use those oranges, what other products we create that have blend components to them, or source oranges from Brazil and South America in a greater quantity than we have in the past. So there's a lot of other issues and factors that come into play.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have a question. So I think with you guys talking about the communication, collaboration, a lot of that what comes out of that is kind of a long-term strategy. And I feel like, it's great for all of you leaders in the room who are talking about that, but a lot of what gets done day to day is, people working on the assembly line and so my question is, how do you determine where to allocate time and resources to spreading that throughout your company? Do you kind of have do you silo it into one task force that kind of goes and spreads, or do you have leaders, throughout in your different teams? So based on your guys' experiences with your own companies, what strategies have you used, and what do you see are the pros and or cons of what you've done so far?
So process improvement type work, whether it's on sustainability or something else. I think, from my experience, we let it emanate from where it needs to be best supported. So if it's a local opportunity, we empower local teams to apply the Lean Six Sigma principles for how best to operate their production line, whether it's a staffing change, whether it's how they produce the different flavors in what sequence, overall raw, the ingredients they're using and so forth. Things that are going to optimize their overall throughput, but also cullage and waste. If it's something that requires a more technical or a sophisticated capital project, then we'll get either for that specific business unit a team that's multifunctional staffed across finance, marketing, supply chain integration, manufacturing, warehousing, transportation. Maybe members of my team to determine, all right, what's the best path forward. So it's really determined by how complex or how local the opportunity is. You never want to stifle the opportunity for people to do what's best.
And within our organization, we actually have some roles that their primary responsibility is to be a liaison between 2 different groups. So they are the conduit for the collaboration, and it's an expectation, quite honestly, with the majority of our teams that they work together. And in some of those key roles, then we will definitely identify it and have it as a key responsibility.
Just to add on, from our perspective at CHEP, our entire growth strategy is built around helping make our customer supply chains more efficient. So for us, it actually infiltrates the entire organization because that's our value proposition. So our strategy is we want to help all of you guys take waste out of your supply chain. So for us, rather than propping up separate teams, it really is about passing out the Kool-Aid and making sure everyone drinks it. So on a regular basis, we're engaging the entire organization. My entire management team is infiltrating the organization with these concepts of efficiency, removing waste. Our goal is to help our customers, all of you, do that better and faster. So we actually went out and invested significantly in completely repositioning our brand a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, around transforming to become a supply chain solutions company that helps our customers take waste out. So we put a tremendous amount of resource and energy, and I would say that my management team is spending most of their time in conversations with our employees about how do we make this thing stick and make it real and make it meaningful, and take the example of 20% more in the truck and multiply that by thousands so that we can measure the results of our efforts.
One other point I'd make is whether it's local, regional, national, global, we try to apply the same principles of Lean Six Sigma for each one of those efforts. The benefit of that is it's very easy for people at different levels and parts of the organization to understand what workflow happened, what process took place, so they trust the outcome and the results much more quickly, therefore decisions are made much more quickly. So consistency helps.
And metrics help.
Yes.
I mean, metrics pull an organization forward. I've seen so many of my clients fail at really good intended objectives because it's really not how anybody made their money. Right? And so people assume that people will do what's best out of the goodness of their heart, and very often many people do that, but it's not the most compelling, right? So it's really important that metrics are aligned, even almost in a matrix sense. So from environmental perspective or sustainability perspective, like that actually there are metrics in all of these different departments that pertain to that, just to keep everybody at every level sort of on task. And if it's not on your scorecard, you kind of forget that that's your North Star, right? So part of what metrics do is they remind us what's important. Oh, this is the thing we're meant to drive. This is what I should wake up and worry about tomorrow. So that's an important part of it, I would say.
To build on Wendy's point, we have a Plant of the Year contest. It's all based on plant manufacturing site of the year. It's based on hard metrics. How many cases did I produce? What was my fill rate? What was my throughput? Haulage, cost of goods, all that. What was missing was we weren't putting any bonus around that or any reward mechanism or metric around what's the engagement? What are they doing to make the team that much more engaged? Because it's not just sustainability of our products, but also sustainability of our workforce. So how much more engagement is there? So we're actually changing the metric to have about 10 to 15% of that metric that's going to determine whether or not you're the #1 plant, which comes with bonus and other prestige, to include those metrics for what are you doing to drive engagement, and how does that compare to what you did last year?
So it's kind of like when class participation is part of your grade.
Well, but it's not just go do something, it's what was the outcome, what was the result of it. Just, I had 10 lunch meetings with my team. Oh, that sounds great, but it's and interesting, but not very. What did it result in? What was your retention? What was your participation as far as members across the board? Not just a check the box.
Great. Well, let's thank the panel here. And also, again, thank CHEP for bringing this all together. Really just wonderful. Thank you so much, Kim and team. It takes a lot of people here.